3 days before the auction, Jack Maddox stood in the tactical operations room of Black Ridge compound, studying satellite feeds that glowed blue-white in the darkness. His fingers traced coordinates on the topographic display, while mountain wind rattled the reinforced windows. 2 in the morning, as the rest of his pack slept, but sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford not when 15 years of searching had finally narrowed to a single location. The door opened without ceremony. Marcus Cole limped in prosthetic leg clicking against concrete, carrying 2 mugs of black coffee. No sugar, no cream. Military habits died harder than the men who formed them. Got confirmation. She's alive. Moved to Denver facility 3 hours ago. Jack's hands tightened on the mug, ceramic threatening to crack under the pressure of an alpha's strength barely contained. The coffee burned his throat, but the pain felt distant compared to the possibility that David Cross's daughter had survived 3 years in Konstantin Volkov's custody. You sure it's the girl from Crescent Valley? Marcus spread surveillance photos across the tactical table. A woman in silver restraints' bruised face turned toward a security camera with defiant eyes that reminded Jack of her father's last moments. Sarah Cross, Alpha David's daughter, only survivor. The photographs told a story Jack recognized from his own combat deployments. This wasn't a broken prisoner awaiting rescue. Every muscle in her stance spoke of loyal violence, a warrior forced into chains but never truly defeated. 3 years as Volkov's captive, and she still stood like someone ready to fight the moment opportunity presented itself. Why didn't you fight back? The question formed in Jack's mind before he could stop it, but the answer lay in the medical notation clipped to her file. Wolf's Bane toxicity, critical levels. They had been poisoning her systematically, keeping her weak enough to control but alive enough to remain valuable. How many handlers has she gone through? Marcus pulled up incident reports on the tablet. 8 in 3 years. Last one needed reconstructive surgery after she got his arm into a joint lock and dislocated his shoulder in 4 places. Volkov's moving her to auction because she's too difficult to break. Jack's wolf stirred beneath his skin, recognizing something in those photographs that his human mind hadn't fully processed yet. The mate bond whispered along neural pathways 15 years dormant, but suddenly roaring to life. He'd seen Sarah Cross exactly twice before, once at a pack gathering when she was 17, and he was 33, visiting her father to discuss territorial alliances. The second time had been 3 hours after Rogue slaughtered Crescent Valley pack, when he'd arrived to find only bodies and blood-soaked earth. Her father's medical tag had been clutched in a dead Rogue's hand, along with torn fabric from Sarah's jacket. Jack had assumed she'd died with the rest of her family, another casualty, in a war that never seemed to end. 15 years of searching through Volkov's trafficking networks, following cold trails and dead ends, certain he was chasing a ghost. But ghosts didn't break handlers' arms. Ghosts didn't stare down security cameras with eyes that promised retribution. Intel source says she's being sold because she's difficult. Marcus continued zooming in on facility schematics. But Volkov doesn't know who she really is. If other buyers discover her value, we're looking at a bidding war that could go into 8 figures. Jack studied the satellite imagery of Volkov's Denver compound, converted warehouse district, heavy security, multiple escape routes. The kind of location that spoke to paranoia earned through decades of criminal enterprise. Volkov ran the largest supernatural trafficking ring in North America, moving wolves like livestock across state lines, selling them to the highest bidder for labor breeding stock, or worse. 3 years ago, Volkov had acquired something far more valuable than he realized. Elena Moonfire's last living heir bloodline, thought extinct for 2 generations, held captive and drugged into compliance. If Volkov discovered what he actually possessed, he'd never let her go. The Moonfire line had been legendary Lunas, who could heal with a touch, communicate across vast distances, whose very presence could calm the most savage beast or inspire armies to impossible victory. We're going in as buyers. Jack's voice carried the flat certainty of orders issued under fire when hesitation meant death and second-guessing got Marines killed. Sir, we don't have 5 million liquid. The compound's assets are tied up in reconstruction bonds. Council won't approve liquidating territory holdings for I don't care what the council approves. Jack turned from the satellite feeds, meeting Marcus's gaze with alpha authority that made the air itself feel heavier. David Cross gave me this pack when I had nothing left. Found me 3 days after my entire family was slaughtered, covered in blood and ready to die. He pulled me back from the edge, gave me purpose, taught me how to lead again. Jack's memories of those days remain fragmented. The Kosovo deployment, where everything had gone sideways. Coming home to find his pack, compound burned to ash, every wolf he'd sworn to protect, lying dead as he was halfway across the world following orders. David Cross had found him in the wreckage, weapon in hand, debating whether survival was worth the guilt. Your father died in a war that never should have happened. David's words had cut through the haze of grief and rage. But his pack survives because you're still breathing. Honor his memory by building something that lasts. So Jack had built Blackridge from nothing. 47 wolves, all veterans, who'd lost their original packs to violence or betrayal, all looking for a second chance at belonging. They'd carved this compound from Montana wilderness, mixing military discipline with pack loyalty, creating something that resembled a fire base more than a traditional wolf sanctuary. I won't let his daughter rot in Volkov's cage because of accounting concerns. Mortgage the territory if necessary. Leverage every asset we control. We're bringing her home. Marcus nodded slowly, the kind of acknowledgement that came from 15 years of fighting, besides someone learning when to argue and when to simply execute orders. What about the team? Not just us. Full tactical squad. Jack pulled up personnel files on the display faces of wolves who'd proven themselves in combat across 3 continents. Ramirez for communications, best signals specialist in the Marines before he took shrapnel in Kandahar, and his pack rejected him for the disability. Chen for weapons and demolitions, former Navy SEAL who'd lost his original pack to a corporate buyout that left them scattered across 6 states. Williams for transport and extraction. Air Force pilot who'd been dishonorably discharged after refusing to abandon wounded wolves during an evac under fire. All of them veterans, all of them building new lives in Blackridge because their old ones had been destroyed by forces beyond their control. Jack had given them purpose. Now he was asking them to risk everything for a woman they'd never met based on a debt to a dead man. But that was how honor worked. Debts didn't expire with the creditor. They accumulated interest, compounding over years until repayment became the only path forward that allowed a man to look at himself in the mirror. Ramirez arrived within 30 minutes, lean and quick, despite the scar tissue that covered 40% of his torso. Chen followed, moving with the contained violence of someone who'd spent years learning to kill efficiently in close quarters. Williams was last, older than the others by a decade, gray, threading through his dark hair, but eyes still sharp enough to land helicopters and save cities. Jack spread the mission parameters across the tactical table, while his team studied satellite imagery with professional detachment. This is a rescue operation disguised as a purchase. Target is Sarah Cross, daughter of Alpha David Cross of Crescent Valley Pack. She's being held at Volkov's Denver facility and will be moved to auction in 72 hours. Ramirez zoomed in on the warehouse district. Security's going to be military grade. Volkov doesn't take chances after the Seattle incident. The Seattle incident had been 6 months earlier. Rival trafficking organization had attempted a raid on one of Volkov's holdings, trying to steal high-value merchandise. Volkov had responded with overwhelming force, killing 23 attackers and posting their heads on pikes outside the warehouse as a warning. The message had been clear: challenge Volkov's operations and die screaming. That's why we're not raiding. Jack pulled up financial records, transfer authorizations, shell companies established over the past decade for exactly this kind of operation. We go in as legitimate buyers. I play wealthy alpha looking to acquire breeding stock. You provide security. We bid. We win. We extract the target before Volkov realizes who she actually is. Chen studied Sarah's photograph with the clinical assessment of someone evaluating the weapon's capabilities. She looks like she can handle herself. What's our contingency if she doesn't want to be rescued? Then we explain the situation and hope she's smart enough to recognize allies from captors. Jack met each team member's eyes in turn, making sure they understood the stakes. This woman is Elena Moonfire's last living heir. If Volkov discovers that, he'll never let her go. The Moonfire bloodline makes her worth more than every other wolf in his inventory combined. Williams let out a low whistle. Moonfire line was supposed to be extinct. Council said the council was wrong. Jack pulled up genealogical records documentation that had taken 8 years to piece together through pack archives and DNA databases. Sarah's grandmother was Elena Moonfire's daughter, hidden away after the Moonfire line became politically inconvenient. Too much power in one line threatens the balance, so they erased the connection and let everyone believe the genetics had died out. But genetics didn't lie. Sarah Cross carried Elena Moonfire's legacy in her cell's dormant power, waiting for the right trigger to manifest. Traditional pack lore said Moonfire abilities awakened at 33, the same age Christ had been crucified, symbolic timing that ancient Lunas had believed carried spiritual significance. How old is she now? Ramirez was already calculating timeline implications. 32, birthday in 4 days. The room went silent as everyone processed the implications. They weren't just rescuing a trafficking victim, they were extracting a potential weapon of mass destruction before her powers manifested in an environment where Volkov could exploit or corrupt them. Moonfire Lunas at full strength could heal armies, break sieges through sheer force of presence, turn the tide of conflicts that conventional force couldn't touch. In the wrong hands, that power became leverage against every pack in North America. What's our budget ceiling? Marcus's question was purely tactical. No point planning an operation if they couldn't afford to execute it. 5 million cash, another 5 in leveraged assets if bidding goes higher. Jack had already run the numbers, calculated exactly how far he could push before bankrupting Blackridge entirely. 10 million total. Beyond that, we extract by force and deal with the consequences. Chen began sketching backup plans on the tactical display, exit routes, and defensive positions in case the purchase turned into a firefight. Williams plotted aerial extraction points, identifying helipads and open ground suitable for emergency evac. Ramirez mapped communication networks, finding frequencies Volkov's security used and identifying jamming options if negotiations broke down. This was what Jack had built at Blackridge, not just a pack, but a military unit that operated with precision born from hard experience. They'd survived because they planned for worst-case scenarios and executed with disciplined efficiency. Sentiment was a luxury. They dealt in tactics and probability curves. We deploy in 48 hours. Jack's voice cut through the planning session, focusing scattered energy into unified purpose. Ramirez, I want full signals, intelligence on Volkov's Denver facility, guard rotations, communication protocols, security response times. Chen requisition appropriate firepower for close quarters, combat suppressed weapons in case we need to fight our way out quietly. Williams arranged transport and have backup extraction ready at 3 different LCs. Marcus pulled up auction house schematics, studying the converted warehouse where Volkov conducted his sales. What about the auction itself? These events draw every major player in supernatural trafficking. We show up, we're going to be recognized. Good. Let them recognize Iron Wolf Maddox buying merchandise. Establishes credibility. Jack's reputation had been built through calculated violence. He didn't start fights, but he finished them with extreme prejudice. Other alphas gave Blackridge territory a wide berth because Jack had proven repeatedly that attacking his pack meant accepting total war in return. 3 years ago, a rival alpha had tried to expand into Blackridge territory, pushing boundaries through systematic harassment. Jack had responded by capturing the alpha's entire command structure in a single night raid, then releasing them with a message carved into their skin, "Test me again, and next time I keep the bodies." The rival alpha had withdrawn immediately, and no one had challenged Blackridge's borders since. Reputation was currency in their world. Jack planned to spend some of that currency buying Sarah Cross's freedom. The team dispersed to their assignments, leaving Jack alone with satellite feeds and tactical displays that painted Denver in shades of blue and gray. Somewhere in that city, Sarah Cross was preparing for an auction that would determine her future. She didn't know help was coming. Probably wouldn't believe it if someone told her 3 years of captivity taught prisoners that hope was a liability, that expecting rescue only made betrayal hurt worse. Jack understood that lesson intimately. He'd learned it watching his family burn while he was halfway across the world, unable to protect the people who'd depended on him for safety. David Cross had taught him that survival required purpose beyond personal grief, that leadership meant carrying others through darkness even when your own path remained unclear. Now Jack would repay that lesson by bringing David's daughter home, regardless of the cost. 48 hours later, Jack stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the collar of an expensive suit that felt like a costume. The fabric was Italian, custom tailored to accommodate the breadth of shoulders that came from decades of combat training. He looked like exactly what the role required: wealthy alpha with money to burn and morals flexible enough to participate in human trafficking with supernatural characteristics. Marcus appeared in the doorway similarly dressed but visibly uncomfortable. The prosthetic leg didn't show beneath tailored slacks, but Jack knew his second-in-command hated formal wear with the passion of someone who'd spent too many years in body armor and tactical gear. Chen and Ramirez are in position. Williams has the backup bird fueled and ready at staging area. Marcus's voice was pure business, no trace of the friendship that had developed over 15 years of shared trauma and hard-won victory. We're green across the board. Jack checked the concealed communication unit built into his collar, subvocal microphone that would pick up even whispered words and transmit them to the team. The technology was military-grade, borrowed from spec ops units that operated in environments where radio silence meant survival. Remember, we're buyers until the situation forces us to be something else. Jack's reflection stared back at him, gray threading through dark hair at the temples, scars visible along his jaw where silver claws had cut deep during the Kosovo incident. He looked 48 years old and every fight that age represented. The drive to Denver took 3 hours through mountain passes still dusted with late spring snow. Jack rode in the passenger seat of a black Mercedes S-Class, Williams at the wheel, with Marcus in back maintaining tactical awareness of their surroundings. They looked like wealthy alpha and his security detail, not combat unit, preparing for potential firefight. Chen and Ramirez had entered Denver separately, establishing overwatch positions near the warehouse district, where Volkov conducted business. The auction house was converted industrial, spaced high ceilings, open floor, planned multiple exits for quick dispersal if law enforcement became interested. Supernatural trafficking occupied legal gray area. Technically, humans couldn't prosecute crimes involving non-humans, but interstate commerce violations still carried federal penalties. Volkov operated by keeping his business compartmentalized. Different facilities for acquisition, processing, storage, and sale. Sarah had been moved through the network like inventory, probably never spending more than a week in any single location. Smart operational security that made rescue operations nearly impossible without inside intelligence. Jack's inside intelligence had cost him 2 years and $17,000 in bribes, but the investment was paying dividends now. They arrived at the warehouse as sunset painted Denver's skyline orange and gold. Other vehicles lined the street, luxury cars mixed with armored SUVs, the wolves from across North America, converging for an event that catered to appetites polite society refused to acknowledge. Jack recognized several alphas by scent alone: the Dallas pack leader, who specialized in acquiring breeding females; the Seattle trafficker who'd barely survived Volkov's retaliation; the Vancouver operator who ran wolves across the Canadian border for wealthy collectors. All of them predators in expensive suits, pretending civilization, while participating in slavery with supernatural characteristics. Jack's wolf snarled beneath his skin, hating everything this place represented. But discipline meant controlling base instincts in service of larger objectives. He'd come here to buy Sarah Cross's freedom through methods that turned his stomach. But the alternative, leaving her in Volkov's custody, was unacceptable. The warehouse interior hit all the notes of underground, auction aesthetic, dim lighting stone platforms where merchandise would be displayed, rows of seating that suggested theater more than human trafficking. Crystal chandeliers hung from industrial beams, creating cognitive dissonance between elegant decor and brutal purpose. Jack took a seat in the third row, Marcus standing behind him in classic bodyguard position. Chen's voice cracked through the sub-vocal comm. In position north, overwatch. Clear sight lines to all exits. Ramirez followed seconds later. Signals locked, monitoring security frequencies, no unusual chatter. The auction house filled quickly, perhaps 200 buyers settling into seats while security personnel lined the walls. Volkov's guards were professional muscle, ex-military, heavily armed, moving with coordination that suggested recent training. Jack cataloged defensive positions, calculating how many he'd need to neutralize if extraction required violence. Then Volkov himself appeared on the main platform, and Jack's estimation of the threat level increased significantly. Konstantin Volkov wore his 60 years silver hair, slicked back suit that probably cost more than most cars. But the predatory grace in his movements belonged to something far more dangerous than wealthy businessman. This was the man who'd built trafficking empire through systematic violence, who'd survived 2 decades in supernatural underworld by being faster, smarter, and more ruthless than everyone else. Welcome, gentlemen. Volkov's accent carried traces of Moscow upbringing, smoothed by years of American business. Tonight, we offer exceptional merchandise carefully selected for your particular needs. Breeding stock labor assets, specialty acquisitions for discerning collectors. Jack's hands tightened on the armrests, violence screaming through his veins, demanding immediate action. But discipline held timing was everything in combat, and premature engagement got people killed. The auction proceeded through catalog of human misery. Young wolves sold for breeding programs, older ones designated for labor, in conditions that would kill humans within months. Jack watched faces around him, bidding casually on lives, treating people like commodities, and promised himself that when this was over, he'd dedicate resources to burning Volkov's entire operation to ash. But first he needed to save Sarah Cross. She appeared on the platform 40 minutes into the auction, and Jack's breath stopped entirely. The photographs hadn't captured everything. Sarah moved like a caged predator, despite silver restraints, bruised face lifted in defiance that should have been beaten out of her years ago. Silver hair fell past her shoulders, distinctive enough to mark her as rare commodity. Emerald eyes scanned the crowd, and for one electric moment, her gaze locked with Jack's across the warehouse. Recognition flashed between them. Not memory exactly, but something deeper. Mate bonds stirring to life 15 years dormant, but impossible to ignore now. Jack felt his wolf surge against control, desperate to tear through silver chains and claim what belonged to him. But Sarah's expression showed confusion more than recognition. 3 years of wolfsbane poisoning had clearly damaged her memory, along with her strength. She knew him from somewhere, but couldn't place where or when. The uncertainty in her eyes nearly broke his carefully maintained cover. Lot 47. Volkov's voice carried commercial enthusiasm that made Jack want to tear his throat out. Silver Wolf age 32, acquired from Crescent Valley Pack after their unfortunate dissolution. Excellent breeding lines, documented history suitable for domestic labor or specialty services. The final phrase sent rage flooding through Jack's system. Specialty services meant exactly what it sounded like: high-end buyers who wanted more than labor from their acquisitions. Sarah's distinctive appearance made her valuable for purposes that would require killing everyone in this warehouse to prevent. Bidding starts at 1 million. The scarred beta in the front row raised his paddle immediately. Jack recognized him from intelligence reports enforcer for the Chicago Pack, known for sadistic treatment of subordinates. Exactly the kind of buyer who breaks Sarah completely within months. 1.2. A platinum blonde female alpha from the West Coast contingent expression, suggesting she viewed Sarah as potential breeding stock for strengthening her pack's bloodline. Jack let the bidding climb to 2 million before entering the competition. His voice carried alpha authority that made several buyers turn to identify the challenger. 2.5 million. The scarred beta scowled, recognizing Iron Wolf Maddox and calculating whether challenging him was worth the political complications. The beta raised his paddle again. 3 million. Around the warehouse, whispers began spreading. Maddox of Blackridge was participating personally, not sending subordinates. That meant something significant was happening. Other alphas started withdrawing from bidding, unwilling to challenge someone with Jack's reputation over single acquisition. But one buyer remained anonymous, sitting in shadows at the back of the warehouse, raising their paddle without revealing their face. 4 million. Jack's instincts screamed warning. Unknown buyers with that kind of capital were never good news. Either rival trafficker trying to acquire valuable asset, or someone who knew exactly what Sarah represented: Moonfire air power beyond measure, potential weapon that could reshape North American pack politics. 5 million. Jack's voice was flat, certainty brooking no further challenge. The unknown buyer hesitated, then lowered their paddle. Volkov's gavel fell with sound like thunder. Sold to Mr. Maddox of Blackridge. Jack rose from his seat, moving toward the platform with Marcus at his shoulder. Every instinct screamed that extraction would get complicated. Volkov was too smart not to suspect something unusual about Iron Wolf personally attending auction for single acquisition. But the transaction was legal now, paperwork signed, money transferred through encrypted channels that made tracking difficult. Sarah watched him approach with eyes that mixed hope and terror in equal measure. She still didn't fully remember him, but some part of her recognized safety when she saw it. Jack reached the platform and met Volkov's gaze with alpha dominance that made the air itself feel heavy. I believe we have business to conclude. Volkov's smile held calculation that confirmed Jack's suspicions. Indeed, Mr. Maddox, I confess surprise seeing you here personally. Your reputation suggests delegating such mundane acquisitions to subordinates. This one's personal. Jack didn't elaborate, letting Volkov make whatever assumptions he wanted. The backstage area smelled like fear and silver. Jack unlocked Sarah's restraints, personally feeling the metal burn his palms, even through alpha resistance. The silver had been touching her skin for hours, maybe days, chemical burns visible on wrists and throat wounds that should have healed instantly on any healthy wolf. Can you walk? His voice was low enough that only she could hear beneath the warehouse's ambient noise. Sarah's response came hoarse from disuse and damage. I can run if I need to. Respect flooded through Jack at the steel in her voice. 3 years of captivity, systematic poisoning, physical abuse that would have broken most wolves completely, and she was ready to sprint the moment opportunity presented itself. Good, because we might have to. He steadied her with one hand on her lower back, protective gesture that felt natural despite barely knowing her. The mate bond hummed between them, recognition operating on levels beneath conscious thought. They were 10 feet from the exit when Dmitri materialized from shadows with 5 security personnel blocking their path. The Russian accent matched Volkov's, suggesting a family connection or long association. Mr. Volkov wishes to verify transaction details. Please, moment of your time. Marcus's hand drifted toward concealed weapon, waiting for Jack's signal. Chen's voice crackled through the comm. I have shot on 3 targets. Say the word. But they were an enclosed space with 200 witnesses and unknown variables. Starting firefight now meant escalating situation beyond control. Jack let Alpha Aura fill the parking garage pressure that made Dimitri's guards step back involuntarily. I paid cash. Transactions complete. She's mine now. Walk away. Sarah tensed beside him, coiling like spring wound too tight. Jack could feel her preparing to fight warrior instinct, overriding self-preservation. He whispered, barely audible, not yet. Trust me. Dmitri studied them both with calculation that suggested intelligence beyond simple muscle. Mr. Volkov asks you meet him tomorrow. Discuss future business opportunities. He believes mutually beneficial arrangements possible. Translation: Volkov had recognized Sarah's potential value and wanted to negotiate ongoing relationships. Either sharing profits from her exploitation or eliminating competition before Jack could leverage whatever made her worth $5 million. I'll consider it. The lie came easily, buying time and space to disappear before Volkov's suspicions crystallized into action. Dmitri nodded slowly, stepping aside with his security team. Tomorrow then. Volkov will contact you. Jack guided Sarah toward the Mercedes where Williams waited with engine running. Every step felt like walking through minefield, waiting for the trap to spring. But they reached the vehicle without incident, Marcus climbing him back while Jack settled Sarah in passenger seat. The moment Williams pulled into Denver traffic, Sarah spoke for the first time since leaving the warehouse. Who are you? Jack met her eyes in the mirror, seeing confusion and fragmented memory struggling to connect. My name is Jack Maddox. Your father saved my life. Twice. I've been looking for you for 15 years. Tears gathered in Sarah's eyes, first crack in the armor she'd built to survive captivity. She remembered something, pieces clicking together even through the fog of Wolfsbane poisoning. My father, he talked about someone. Young Maddox's finest soldier he ever trained. That was me. Jack's voice carried weight of relief and impossible death. 3 hours after your pack was slaughtered, I arrived to find only bodies. Your medical tag was in a dead rogue's hand. I thought you died with everyone else. Sarah's hands were shaking, withdrawal symptoms becoming visible now that adrenaline was fading. And when's the last time you shifted? 3 years. They kept me on silver IV drips, chemical suppression plus physical restraint, ensuring she remained weak enough to control. Jesus Christ. Jack pulled emergency medical kit from under his seat, military-grade supplies that Williams kept stocked. I need to draw a blood, check your toxicity levels. Sarah's laugh held bitter edge of someone who'd stopped expecting kindness years ago. You planning to fix me or own me? Neither. Planning to keep promise to your father. Jack met her gaze directly, letting her see truth beneath the words. David Cross saved me when I had nothing left. Gave me purpose, taught me how to lead again. I owe him everything. That debt transfers to you. Silence filled the vehicle while Sarah processed information her damaged memory struggled to organize. Jack could see her fighting through fog of poisoning, trying to remember fragments of past that connected them. Finally, she spoke again, her voice small and lost in a way that broke something in Jack's chest. The Crescent Valley Massacre. I remember fire, screaming, my father telling me to run. I was there 3 hours after. Jack's hands tightened on the medical kit. Too late to save anyone, but early enough to promise your father I'd find you. Sarah's tears fell freely now. Grief held at bay for 3 years, finally breaking through. They told me everyone died, that I was alone. You're not alone, Jack's voice carried absolute conviction. You're packed now, Black Ridge Pack. We take care of our own. The drive to Montana took 3 hours through mountain passes, Sarah drifting in and out of consciousness as her body struggled with toxin overload. Jack monitored her vital signs, concerned about the levels of Wolf's Bane still circulating through her system. She should be dead, anyone else would be dead with that much poison. But something in her genetics was fighting back, Moonfire blood resisting chemical suppression, even when conscious mind had surrendered. Chen's voice crackled through the comm. Boss, we got a problem. Volkov's security team is shadowing you. 3 vehicles staying 2 miles back. How long? Jack was already calculating ambush points along the highway places where Volkov might attempt recovery. Since you left Denver, they're coordinating through encrypted channels, military-grade communication. Ramirez is monitoring, but can't crack the encryption in real time. Marcus leaned forward from back seat. He knows. Whatever tipped him off, Volkov figured out Sarah's more valuable than standard merchandise. Jack studied Sarah's face in the dashboard lights, seeing resemblance to her father in the strong jaw, in direct gaze, even unconscious. Volkov knows we're not standard buyers. Whether he's figured out the Moonfire connection or just suspects we're rival operators, he's not letting her go without a fight. Williams adjusted the rearview mirror. We've got 20 miles to state line. Once we cross into Montana, it's your territory. He'll have harder time operating there, assuming we make it to the state line. Chen's voice carried tactical assessment born from years in hostile territory. These roads are perfect for ambush narrow passes, limited visibility, nowhere to run if they box us in. Jack made the decision with cold certainty that came from decades leading men into combat. Williams, contact the pack. I want full defensive positions at the border. Anyone crosses into Black Ridge territory, they don't cross back out. The ambush came 10 miles from the state line, exactly where Jack would have positioned it if roles were reversed. Volkov's vehicles closed distance, suddenly boxing the Mercedes between 2 trucks, while a third blocked the road ahead. Professional execution that confirmed ex-military background. Williams hit the brakes hard, avoiding collision, but leaving them trapped on narrow mountain highway. Marcus had weapon drawn before the car fully stopped scanning for targets through tinted windows. Jack checked Sarah's still unconscious vitals, stable but weak. Dimitri emerged from the lead truck, flanked by 8 security personnel armed with automatic weapons. They wore body armor and moved with coordination that suggested recent training. Not standard muscle, these were operators who knew their business. Mr. Maddox, Dimitri's voice carried through closed windows, amplified enough to be heard clearly. Mr. Volkov wishes to renegotiate terms of sale. Jack opened his door, slowly, hands visible, projecting calm authority, despite situations spiraling toward violence. The sale is complete. Legal transfer of ownership. No renegotiation necessary. Dimitri smiled without fear. Mr. Volkov believes merchandise was misrepresented. Value significantly exceeds price paid. He offers $10 million for her return. 20 seconds to state line, Chen's voice whispered through the comm. I can drop 4 targets before they react. Ramirez has another 3. 1 target, unknown position. Not yet, Jack subvocalized. Let's see if we can resolve this diplomatically. Sarah's in no condition to be moved again. Jack kept his voice reasonable, buying time while his team positioned for engagement. She needs medical treatment. Push this, and she might not survive the transfer. That is risk Mr. Volkov accepts. Dimitri's hand drifted toward his weapon. Please step away from vehicle. The calculation was simple mathematics. 8 security personnel versus Jack's team of 4 with Sarah as vulnerable civilian, complicating every tactical decision. Standard odds would favor Volkov's people. They had number superior positioning element of surprise. But standard odds didn't account for what Jack Maddox had built at Blackridge. His people weren't just trained, they were combat veterans who survived situations where survival seemed impossible, who'd learned that victory belonged to whoever was willing to pay the highest price in blood and pain. Jack's alpha aura exploded outward pressure wave of dominance that hit Dimitri's people like physical force. Wolves with less control would have submitted immediately, dropping to their knees from instinctive response to superior predator. But Volkov's guards were professionals. They merely staggered, buying Jack's team the half-second advantage they needed. Chen's rifle barked twice from overwatch position, precision shots dropping 2 security personnel with headshots before the rest could react. Ramirez followed with 3 more targets, eliminated bullets, finding gaps in body armor with surgical accuracy. Marcus exploded from the Mercedes like coiled spring, releasing prosthetic leg, not slowing him at all, as he closed distance and put 2 rounds through Dimitri's chest before the Russian could draw his weapon. Jack shifted mid-stride bones, restructuring with practiced ease, born from decades of experience. His wolf form was massive, even by alpha standards, black fur and golden eyes that burned with predatory focus. The remaining guards tried to bring weapons to bear, but Jack was already among them, claws tearing through Kevlar and flesh with equal ease. 30 seconds from first shot to last body hitting the ground. Jack shifted back to human form, breathing barely elevated, checking Sarah through the Mercedes window. Still unconscious, unharmed, completely unaware of the violence that had just erupted around her. Williams was already pulling bodies off the road, dragging them into the tree line, where they'd be harder to spot from passing vehicles. Chen and Ramirez converged from their overwatch positions, weapons still ready for secondary threat. Marcus clutched his side where one guard's lucky shot had creased ribs, not serious, but enough to leave blood trail. "Check him." Jack jerked his chin toward Marcus while pulling spare clothes from the trunk. "Can't have you bleeding out before we reach the compound." "I'm fine." Marcus waved off concern, even as Dr. Wright's voice crackled through the emergency channel. "You're damn well not fine. Get back here so I can patch you up properly before you collapse from blood loss." The rest of the drive passed without incident, crossing into Montana territory where Blackridge Pack had established defensive perimeter. Sarah woke once as they passed through the gates, seeing high fences and guard towers that suggested military installation more than traditional Pack compound. "Where are we?" Her voice was hoarse, confused, fighting through fog and drugs and exhaustion. "Home." Jack's answer was simple truth. "You're home now." Blackridge compound sprawled across 100 acres of mountain wilderness, reinforced structures positioned with tactical precision that prioritized defense over aesthetics. Guard towers provided overlapping fields of fire underground. Bunkers offered shelter during attacks. Training yards allowed Pack members to maintain combat readiness. Jack had built this place to be Fortress first, Sanctuary second. Sarah took it all in with eyes that suggested military background. She was cataloging defensive positions, escape routes, strategic weaknesses with automatic assessment of trained soldier. "This looks like fire-based Restrepo." Pride touched Jack's voice despite the circumstances. "That's the idea. We've had 3 attacks in 10 years. 0 casualties." Marcus was already moving toward medical bay, trying to hide the limp that suggested his wound was worse than he'd admitted. Pack members emerged from various buildings, drawn by news of their alpha's return and curious about the woman he'd paid $5 million to acquire. Thomas Wright waited at the entrance to medical, 68 years old, with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much death to be shocked by war. He'd been a Navy physician during Vietnam, patching Marines together in jungle hell that made modern combat zones look civilized by comparison. After military discharge, he'd found his way to Blackridge, seeking redemption through healing after years of triage that left more dead than saved. "Let's get her inside." Wright's voice carried no-nonsense authority that even alphas obeyed when it came to medical matters. "And you, Marcus, examination table now? I can smell your blood from here." Sarah allowed herself to be guided into medical bay, too exhausted to resist even if she'd wanted to. Jack stayed close, protective instinct overriding the tactical part of his brain that knew he should be coordinating defensive positions in case Volkov sent reinforcements. Wright worked with efficient competence, drawing blood samples while checking Sarah's vitals and making concerned noises. "Wolf's Bane levels are critical. She should be dead." How are you even standing? Sarah's bitter laugh held echoes of three-year nightmare. Spite mostly, your Moonfire genes are fighting the poison. Wright pulled up test results on a tablet showing Jack toxic levels that should have killed her months ago. But they're barely keeping pace. She needs IV detox, minimum 72 hours before the worst symptoms clear. We might not have 72 hours. Jack pulled up the security feed on his phone showing perimeter defenses and sensor networks surrounding Black Ridge territory. Volkov knows we have her. He'll come with everything. Then you better pray I'm as good at my job as I used to be. Wright started hanging IV bags, mixing compounds that would bind to Wolf's Bane molecules and accelerate their removal from Sarah's bloodstream. This is going to be rough. The detox process feels like dying slowly. Most wolves don't have the pain tolerance to survive it conscious. Sarah's eyes found Jack's, looking for something reassurance, promise hope that survival was possible. I've survived worse. That remained to be seen. Wolf's Bane detox wasn't just painful, it was actively dangerous. As the poison left her system, Sarah's wolf would try to reassert control, fighting against 3 years of suppression, with all the violence of caged animal finally breaking free. If she shifted prematurely before her body had recovered enough strength to handle the transformation, the strain could kill her. But if she didn't detox completely, the residual poison would prevent her Moonfire abilities from manifesting when her 33rd birthday arrived in 4 days. Jack was studying strategic implications when Ramirez burst into the medical bay, tablet in hand, an expression grim. "Sir, we have a problem." The tablet showed encrypted message that had arrived through channels reserved for alpha-to-alpha communication. Volkov's face filled the screen, his smile that promised violence delivered with civilized precision. "Maddox, I know who she is. Elena Moonfire's heir." Volkov's English was perfect accent, adding exotic flavor without impeding understanding. "You have 96 hours to return her or I come take her. I have 200 mercenaries under contract. You have what, 50 veterans? Arithmetic is not in your favor. Bring her to neutral ground. I'll pay you double 10 million cash. Refuse and your pack dies with you." The message ended with coordinates for proposed exchange and timestamp, 96 hours. Jack replayed the message twice, studying Volkov's face for tells that might reveal tactical intentions. The Russian was too controlled to show much, but tiny micro-expressions suggested genuine confidence. He believed he had overwhelming advantage, that Jack would fold under pressure rather than sacrifice his entire pack for one woman. Volkov didn't understand that Jack Maddox had already lost everything else. He'd spent 15 years building something worth protecting, and no amount of arithmetic would make him surrender to threats. Ramirez recall all patrols, fortify perimeter defenses, Chen inventory weapons and ammunition. Williams prep emergency evac routes in case we need to scatter civilians. Jack's orders came rapid-fire muscle memory from decades leading men in combat. "Marcus, soon as Wright patches you up, I need full tactical assessment of defensive positions." The command center transformed into war room. Within minutes, maps spread across tables. Weapons being distributed, pack members taking up positions with discipline that came from training under someone who'd survived multiple deployments. These weren't traditional wolves playing at military organization. They were actual veterans applying hard-won skills to supernatural combat. Sarah appeared in the doorway, still connected to IV line, but refusing to stay in medical despite Wright's protests. "Can you fight?" Her voice was stronger now, determination overriding physical weakness. Jack turned to find her studying the tactical displays with eyes that suggested familiarity with operational planning. "Can you? I was Army medic, 82nd Airborne." Sarah crossed to the map table, tracing defensive positions with practiced assessment. "Combat deployments in Iraq and Syria. Trained counterinsurgency and forward combat medicine. 6 years active duty before I came home to take over pack physician duties from my mother." The information recontextualized everything. Sarah wasn't helpless victim requiring rescue. She was trained warrior who'd been systematically disabled through chemical suppression. Given time to recover and proper support, she could be force multiplier instead of liability. "Why didn't you fight back when Volkov's people took you?" Marcus asked the question Jack had been wondering since seeing her photograph. Sarah's expression went cold, remembering. "I killed 3 of them. 4th hit me with Wolf's Bane dart from distance. Woke up in a cage with silver ivy in my arm. Respect rippled through the command center. These were men who understood violence intimately, who could recognize warrior spirit even in someone barely strong enough to stand. Sarah Cross had survived 3 years of systematic torture without breaking, maintaining enough situational awareness to count and kill her. Attackers displayed tactical competence despite being chemically suppressed. She was exactly David Cross's daughter, warrior trained to impossible standard, too stubborn to quit, even when surrender would be easier. Your plan has a flaw. Sarah's voice cut through tactical discussion, challenging analysis that had been proceeding without her input. The room went quiet. Wolves, unused to being contradicted, even by someone with obvious military background. Jack gestured for her to continue, interested in her assessment, despite barely knowing her. Volkov won't come through mountain passes. Sarah pointed at topographic map, showing approaches to Black Ridge territory. Too predictable, easy to defend. He's Russian mob with military connections. They use Spetsnaz tactics, helicopter insertion, fast rope, onto your compound, establish beachhead before you can respond. She traced attack vector that bypassed all prepared defensive positions, going straight for the compound roof. You fortified ground approaches, but left your upper positions vulnerable. Classic mistake in mountain warfare. Marcus studied the map with new attention, seeing what Sarah had identified. She's right. We're set up to defend against ground assault, but helicopters could drop troops directly into our perimeter. How many helicopters does Volkov have access to? Chen was already calculating load capacity and insertion timing. At least 8. Sarah's memory was fragmentary, but certain about this detail. I saw them at the processing facility before they moved me to Denver. Russian-made Mi-17s, probably acquired through black market weapons dealers. Can carry 30 troops each with full combat load. 240 troops delivered in single wave. Jack felt cold calculations settling over his thoughts, combat mathematics, that had kept him alive through dozens of engagements. We're outnumbered 5-1, and they can bypass our prepared defenses. So we make the compound itself the kill box. Sarah leaned over the map, tactical mind operating, despite chemical fog still clouding her thoughts. Reinforce interior choke points. Position your best shooters to cover likely breach zones. Prepare fallback positions with overlapping fields of fire. Make them pay for every meter they advance. Jack studied her face, seeing not victims requiring protection, but partner capable of contributing to their survival. You sure you're up for this? Sarah's smile held sharp edge of someone who'd learned violence as second language. I've been waiting 3 years to make Volkov pay. Point me at the enemy. The next 4 days passed in blur of preparation that transformed Black Ridge from packed compound into fortress awaiting siege. Defensive positions were reinforced, ammunition stockpiled, medical facilities expanded to handle mass casualties. Pack members drilled, constantly rehearsing response to helicopter assault until actions became automatic. Sarah's detox proceeded faster than Wright had predicted, Moonfire genetics accelerating poison removal at rate that should have been impossible. By the 3rd day, she could walk without assistance. By the 4th morning, her 33rd birthday, the IV came out entirely, and her eyes began glowing with power that made the air around her shimmer like heat, haze. Jack found her on the training yard at dawn, attempting to shift for the first time in 3 years. She was struggling, wolf trying to emerge, but muscles still too weak from prolonged suppression. Frustration radiated from her in waves that he could feel through the mate bond that had been growing stronger each day. He shifted smoothly, Black Wolf, moving to stand beside her, offering support with simple presence. Through the bond, he sent impression of calm strength, alpha dominance, mixed with gentle encouragement. Sarah's eyes found his, and something clicked, recognition, operating on level beneath conscious thought. Her shift completed in sudden rush of silver, light wolf emerging, that was magnificent even by Moonfire standards. Larger than normal female with coat that gleamed like captured starlight, and emerald eyes that burned with supernatural intensity. She was beautiful and terrible, and absolutely his. Their wolves touched muzzle to muzzle, and the mate bond ignited. Gold and silver light danced around them, visible manifestation of connection that transcended physical reality. Every wolf in Black Ridge felt it, that moment of recognition when Alpha found his Luna, when Pack became complete through joining, that went beyond simple romance into something mythic. They shifted back to human form in perfect synchronization, standing face to face in the dawn light. Sarah's expression showed wonder mixed with confusion. She felt the bond but didn't fully understand its implications. Jack stepped back, maintaining distance despite every incident, screaming to close it. We have 72 hours before Volkov arrives. Focus on staying alive first. Everything else can wait. But as he walked away, he felt Sarah's gaze on his back, questions forming that would demand answers once the immediate crisis passed. The mate bond had declared them partners, soulmates, two halves of whole that had been incomplete for decades. Whether Sarah would accept that bond after 3 years of captivity and systematic abuse remained uncertain. Jack had promised to keep her safe, not to claim her as his own. The distinction mattered. She deserved choice about her future, even if his wolf howled in protest at the thought of her choosing to leave. 60 hours before Volkov's deadline, Wright delivered news that changed everything. Sarah's in medical bay. You need to see this. Jack found her sitting on an examination table, hands glowing with silver light, while Wright watched with expression mixing professional fascination and personal concern. Tell him what you just did. Sarah looked up, eyes still carrying traces of supernatural radiance. I healed Marcus's gunshot wound. Completely. Tissue regeneration, nerve repair. Even the scar tissue disappeared. Show me. Jack's voice was carefully controlled, but his wolf was prowling just beneath the surface, excited by implications of what Sarah's emerging powers might mean for their tactical situation. Sarah placed her hands on Jack's forearm, where silver claws had left deep scars during Kosovo deployment. The marks had never fully healed magical corruption, preventing normal regeneration. But as Sarah's power flowed through contact, the scars dissolved skin, becoming smooth and unmarked, as though injury had never occurred. That's impossible. Jack stared at his arm, feeling phantom pain vanishing along with physical evidence of old trauma. Moonfire line doesn't heal injuries, they erase them from existence. Wright's voice carried academic excitement of someone witnessing history firsthand. It's not accelerated regeneration. It's temporal restoration, returning tissue to pre-injury state. Elena Moonfire could reportedly heal entire battalions in minutes, sending warriors back into combat as though they'd never been wounded. Jack's tactical mind immediately calculated implications. If Sarah could restore wounded pack members to fighting condition during battle, the numerical disadvantage became far less significant. Volkov's 200 mercenaries would be facing a force that couldn't be worn down through attrition, that would keep fighting at full strength regardless of casualties inflicted. Can you do this in combat conditions? He met Sarah's eyes, directly looking for truth beneath whatever brave face she might attempt. I don't know. Honesty was preferable to false confidence in Sarah's assessment. The power's still new. I can feel it, but controlling it under stress is different than practicing in medical bay. Then we practice. Jack made the decision with cold certainty. You're combat medic by training, healer by genetics. That combination makes you our most valuable asset. We build our defensive strategy around your abilities. Marcus entered the medical bay moving without trace of injury from the gunshot wound that had nearly killed him days earlier. He rotated his shoulder experimentally, testing range of motion that shouldn't have been possible. Boss perimeter sensors just picked up movement. Volkov's advanced scouts are probing our defensive positions 12 hours ahead of schedule. Jack felt predatory smile spreading across his face. Good. Let them probe. Let them think they understand our capabilities. When the main force arrives, we'll show them what happens when you threaten Blackridge Pack. Sarah slid off the examination table, power still crackling around her hands like controlled lightning. I'm fighting. Don't even think about telling me to hide in the bunker. I wouldn't dream of it. Jack met her fierce gaze with equal intensity. You're packed now. We take care of our own, and right now, taking care means standing together when enemies come calling. The final 12 hours before Volkov's assault passed intense preparation. Jack positioned his best shooters in elevated positions overlooking likely helicopter approach vectors. Marcus coordinated interior defensive positions, creating choke points where superior numbers would become liability in confined space. Chen distributed shaped charges that would bring down helicopters if they attempted landing on compound roof. And Sarah practiced her healing abilities, working with Wright to understand limits and capabilities of power that had been dormant for 32 years. She could restore multiple wounds simultaneously, work at distance, Without direct contact, even resurrect wolves who'd been down for several minutes if their hearts could be restarted quickly enough. The Moonfire gift wasn't just healing, it was the power to deny death itself, to refuse the finality that made combat dangerous. With Sarah operational, Blackridge Pack became something far more dangerous than 50 combat veterans holding defensive position. They became an immortal army that could absorb any punishment and keep fighting. Jack found Sarah on the compound roof at midnight, staring out at mountain darkness, where Volkov's forces were gathering for dawn assault. She sensed his approach without turning, mate bond making each other's presence as familiar as their own heartbeat. "Tell me about my father." Her voice was quiet, intimate, in a way that suggested grief finally breaking through shock and chemical suppression. Jack stood beside her, close enough to feel her warmth, but maintaining respectful distance. David Cross was the finest tactical mind I ever encountered. Taught me that leadership meant carrying others through darkness, that pack wasn't just structure, it was family forged through shared purpose. He found me 3 days after my original pack was slaughtered. I was covered in blood, weapon in hand, debating whether survival was worth the guilt of being alive, when everyone I'd sworn to protect was dead. Your father pulled me back from that edge, gave me purpose beyond grief. He built Blackridge with me, helped recruit our first members, designed defensive positions that have kept us alive through 3 major attacks. Every good decision I've made as Alpha, I learned by watching him lead. Sarah's tears fell silently mourning father. She'd barely had time to remember before Volkov's drugs had stolen even those precious fragments. What was he like? Fierce, protective, believed pack was family first, military unit second. He'd have been proud seeing who you've become. Warrior who survived hell without breaking, healer with strength to deny death, Luna who will stand beside her Alpha in battle instead of hiding behind him. The title hung between them, unspoken acknowledgement of bond that had formed whether they'd chosen it consciously or not. Sarah turned to face him, finally eyes glowing faintly with moonfire radiance. "This mate bond, it's real, isn't it? Not just stress or proximity or..." "It's real." Jack didn't insult her intelligence by pretending otherwise. "Been there since the moment I saw you on that auction platform. My wolf recognized you even when my mind didn't understand why. And you're not going to pressure me about it." Statement, not question, Sarah reading him accurately. "You've been prisoner for 3 years. Last thing you need is another man telling you what you should feel. The bond exists whether we act on it or not. What matters now is surviving tomorrow and making sure Volkov doesn't take away the freedom we just bought you." Sarah studied his face in the moonlight, seeing truth beneath words. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone who'd claim ownership, who'd expect gratitude that looked like submission." Her voice carried bitter experience of men who'd confused control with care during her captivity. "I spent 15 years keeping promise to a dead man." Jack met her eyes steadily, letting her see past Alpha authority to the grief and honor beneath. "Thought it was about duty, about repaying debt I could never fully settle. Turned out it was about finding something worth protecting, building legacy that outlasts the violence that made it necessary." He stepped back, breaking the intimate moment before it could progress further. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we show Volkov what happens when he threatens family." As Jack turned to leave, Sarah's voice stopped him. "Thank you for coming, for fighting, for seeing me as more than broken victim. You were never broken." Jack's response was simple truth. "You were warrior in chains, waiting for someone to hand you a weapon. Tomorrow we fight together." Dawn arrived with sound of helicopter rotors cutting through mountain air, exactly as Sarah had predicted. 8 Mi-17s approached from 4 vectors, simultaneously coordinated assault designed to overwhelm defensive response through sheer massive attacking force. But Blackridge Pack wasn't typical target. They'd spent 4 days preparing for exactly this scenario, positioning anti-air teams and heavy weapons in positions Volkov's scouts hadn't identified during their reconnaissance. Chen's voice came through tactical network with cold precision. "Target lock confirmed on all 8 birds. Awaiting weapons, free authorization." Jack stood in command center, watching multiple feeds from perimeter cameras as Volkov's forces closed distance. Beside him, Sarah radiated power that made instruments flicker. Moonfire abilities fully awakened and ready to deploy. Fire. Single-word authorization that unleashed coordinated defensive response honed through decades of combat experience. Shaped charges detonated around 3 helicopters, Proximity explosions, shredding rotors and sending aircraft tumbling from sky in balls of flame. Heavy machine gun fire raked two more armor-piercing rounds, chewing through passenger compartments and killing troops before they could fast rope to ground. Three helicopters survived the initial barrage, escorting troops onto compound roof and surrounding ground. 60 fighters in the first wave, all wearing body armor and moving with coordination that confirmed military background. The battle had begun. Gunfire erupted across Black Ridge compound with the sharp crack of professional combat, nothing like Hollywood's dramatic thunder. Chen's teams engaged helicopter-deployed troops with suppressed weapons muzzle flashes, barely visible in dawn's gray light. Jack watched tactical feeds from command center while coordinating defensive responses through encrypted channels, seeing his carefully constructed kill box performing exactly as designed. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos with battlefield calm that came from years under fire. North roof breach, 8 hostiles, down 12 advancing through ventilation access. They're using thermal imaging to track our positions. Sarah stood beside Jack, hands already glowing with silver light as casualty reports began filtering through. Her moonfire abilities had awakened fully during the night, power flooding through channels that 3 years of poisoning had tried to destroy. She could feel every pack member within compound perimeter, sensing the pain and fear and determination through connections that transcended normal pack bonds. Williams took shrapnel to the shoulder west tower position. Ramirez reported through static lace transmission. Still combat effective, but bleeding heavily. I've got him. Sarah's consciousness reached across distance. Moonfire energy flowing through pack bonds to touch Williams directly. The healing happened instantaneously, torn tissue knitting together, blood vessels sealing pain, vanishing as though injury had never occurred. Williams's startled gasp came through the comm system seconds later. What the hell just happened? His shoulder worked perfectly, rotating without restriction or discomfort. That's our Luna, Jack's voice carried pride that made Sarah's chest tighten despite the violence erupting around them. She can heal you faster than Volkov's people can hurt you. Make them pay for every inch they take. The tactical display showed Volkov's forces adapting to initial casualties, shifting from direct assault to more cautious advancement. They'd lost 23 troops in the first engagement, learning expensive lesson that Black Ridge defenders weren't typical targets. These were combat veterans who survived deployments across multiple continents, who understood that superior numbers meant nothing if you couldn't bring force to bear effectively. Chen's explosives team detonated charges in the ventilation system, collapsing access tunnels that Volkov's troops had been using to infiltrate interior positions. The blast killed 4 attackers immediately and trapped another 6 in confined space where Black Ridge defenders could engage them with overwhelming advantage. But Volkov had planned for attrition, warfare accepting casualties as necessary cost of achieving objectives. Fresh waves of mercenaries fast-roped from the 3 surviving helicopters, reinforcing positions and maintaining pressure despite mounting losses. The Russian had brought 200 fighters, losing 30, meant he still outnumbered Jack's pack 4-1. They're pushing hard on east perimeter. Marcus coordinated defensive adjustments while physically holding rogue point that prevented enemy breakthrough. Looks like they're trying to create opening for larger force insertion. Jack studied the tactical situation with decades of experience reading battlefield dynamics. Volkov was conducting textbook assault fix, defending forces in place with sustained pressure, then exploit gaps created by defenders rushing to reinforce threatened positions. The strategy would work against conventional opponents who had finite resources and couldn't replace casualties. But Sarah's healing abilities changed fundamental calculus of attrition warfare. Every wounded Black Ridge defender could be restored to combat effectiveness within seconds, while Volkov's casualties remained permanent losses. The numerical advantage that should have guaranteed his victory was eroding with each passing minute. Sarah, can you extend your range beyond compound walls? Jack was already calculating implications if her abilities could reach beyond immediate defensive perimeter. She closed her eyes, reaching out with senses that were still new and overwhelming. I can feel Volkov's people. Their pain signatures are different artificial enhancements that read like corrupted data in my perception. Some of them aren't fully human anymore. The intelligence confirmed Jack's suspicions about Volkov's super soldier program. The Russian had been using stolen werewolf genetics to enhance human mercenaries, creating hybrid warriors with supernatural strength and speed, but none of the control that came from being born to the wolf. The enhancement process was crude and ultimately fatal. Most subjects died within months from cellular breakdown, but it gave Volkov expendable troops who could match supernatural opponents in short-term engagements. Can you disrupt those enhancements? If Sarah could remove Volkov's artificial advantages, the enhanced mercenaries would revert to baseline human capabilities. Sarah's power surged outward in wave of silver light that washed across the compound and beyond, touching every living being within 100-yard radius. Enhanced mercenaries screamed as foreign DNA was purged from their systems, supernatural strength vanishing and leaving them weak and disoriented. 3 collapsed immediately, bodies unable to handle the sudden transformation. Others stumbled, trying to maintain combat effectiveness while their enhanced abilities drained away like water through broken dam. What just happened? Volkov's voice cut through captured radio frequencies, panic creeping into normally controlled tone. Report. The response came fragmented as his forces struggled to understand why their enhanced troops had suddenly become liabilities instead of assets. Unknown effect, possibly electromagnetic pulse or chemical agent. Enhanced units are compromised across all insertion teams. Jack allowed himself a thin smile of satisfaction. That's called fighting smarter instead of harder. Fall back to secondary positions. Let them advance into prepared kill zones. Black Ridge defenders executed tactical retreat with disciplined precision, abandoning outer defensive rings while maintaining fire superiority. Volkov's mercenaries pushed forward eagerly, sensing weakness where none existed, walking directly into overlapping fields of fire that Chen's teams had established during 4 days of preparation. The slaughter was efficient and brutal. Crossfire caught advancing troops in exposed positions, cutting them down with precision that came from years of combat experience. Claymore mines detonated in carefully timed sequence, channeling survivors into narrow corridors, where Black Ridge wolves waited in shifted form, claws and fangs far more effective than bullets at close range. Within 10 minutes, Volkov had lost another 40 troops. The assault that should have overwhelmed Black Ridge through numerical superiority was instead grinding to halt against defenders who refused to break, who absorbed every attack and responded with calculated violence that maximized enemy casualties while minimizing their own. Sarah worked tirelessly throughout the engagement, healing wounds as quickly as they occurred, maintaining Black Ridge's combat effectiveness at levels that should have been impossible. Her Moonfire abilities grew stronger with each use power that had been dormant for 32 years, finally expressing itself fully. She could feel the strain. Maintaining this level of healing required enormous energy expenditure, but adrenaline and determination kept her focused despite growing exhaustion. Marcus took 3 rounds to center mass body armor, stopping the bullets, but kinetic impact breaking ribs and collapsing one lung. He went down hard, gasping for air that wouldn't come, vision tunneling as shock began setting in. Sarah's healing reached him before conscious thought, pure instinct driving power that restored crushed bone and torn tissue within seconds. Marcus sucked in desperate breath, feeling ribs knit together and lung reinflate, then rolled to his feet and put 2 rounds through the mercenary who'd shot him. Thanks, Luna. His voice carried genuine gratitude mixed with wonder at abilities that seemed more divine intervention than medical treatment. Don't thank me yet. Sarah's response was strained exhaustion beginning to show. We've still got 100+ hostiles out there, and I'm burning through energy faster than I can replenish it. Jack heard the weakness in her voice and made an immediate decision. All units tactical withdrawal to Inner Sanctum. We're consolidating defensive positions around Command Center. Move now. The retreat happened in stages, covering fire, allowing each unit to fall back while others maintained pressure on advancing enemies. Volkov's forces sensed victory, pushing harder despite casualties that had already exceeded 50% of original insertion force. They'd come too far and lost too many to withdraw without achieving objectives. But as Black Ridge defenders consolidated around Command Center, they found themselves in position that maximized every advantage. Narrow corridors eliminated numerical superiority, reinforced walls provided cover against heavy weapons, overlapping fields of fire created situation where advancing meant certain death. Volkov's assault stalled completely as mercenaries realized they were attacking fortified position defended by enemies who couldn't be worn down through attrition. The mathematics that should have guaranteed victory through overwhelming numbers had become liability. Every corridor filled with bodies, every approach covered by defenders who seemed impossible to kill. Cease fire. Volkov's order came through and captured frequencies after 20 minutes of futile assaults that accomplished nothing except adding to his casualty count. Fall back to Rally Point Alpha. Regroup for second wave. Jack watched thermal imaging track Volkov's forces withdrawing, leaving behind 73 dead and another 26 wounded too severely to evacuate. The compound had been damaged, windows shattered, walls pockmarked with bullet impacts, fires burning in several structures, but Black Ridge Pack remained intact with 0 fatalities. Casualty report. Jack's voice was steady despite adrenaline still flooding his system. Marcus coordinated responses from unit leaders across the compound. 15 wounded, all restored to combat effectiveness by Luna's intervention. 3 moderate injuries requiring additional medical attention, but not life-threatening. 0 fatalities. The numbers should have been impossible given the ferocity of the assault and numerical disadvantage. Against conventional opponents, Black Ridge would have been overrun within the first hour. But Sarah's healing abilities had fundamentally altered the equation, turning what should have been desperate last stand into defensive victory that left Volkov's forces shattered and demoralized. Sarah collapsed against the command center wall, power finally depleted beyond her ability to maintain consciousness. Jack caught her before she hit the floor, feeling how her skin burned with fever that came from channeling more energy than her body could safely handle. Wright appeared immediately, medical bag already open and emergency supplies ready. She's in energy debt. Her moonfire abilities drew more power than her physical form could sustain. She needs rest, hydration, and time for her metabolism to recover. How long? Jack carried Sarah to examination table, noting how light she felt despite muscle mass that suggested combat training and physical conditioning. 12 hours minimum before she should attempt healing again. Wright started IV fluids while monitoring vital signs that fluctuated wildly. Possibly longer if we want to avoid permanent damage. The Moonfire gift is incredibly powerful, but it's not unlimited. Push too hard, and she'll burn herself out completely. Jack studied Sarah's unconscious face, seeing exhaustion written in dark circles and pale skin. She'd held nothing back during the battle, giving everything to keep his pack alive, depleting herself without hesitation or complaint. The mate bond whispered that she was his responsibility now that her well-being mattered as much as his own survival. But responsibility worked both ways. Sarah had proven herself a warrior, both earning respect through actions rather than demanding it through title or bloodline. She'd fought beside his pack, bled for his people, demonstrated courage that matched any combat veteran Jack had ever known. She's earned her place here. Marcus spoke quietly from the doorway, voicing what everyone was thinking. Luna by deed, not just by birth or mate bond. The pack will follow her. Jack nodded slowly, understanding the significance. In traditional pack structure, Luna gained authority through mating with Alpha and demonstrating wisdom over time. But Sarah had compressed that process, proving her worth through trial by fire that left no doubt about her capabilities or commitment. Get some rest, all of you. Jack's orders carried weight of exhaustion that matched what his pack was feeling. Volkov will regroup and come again probably within 24 hours. Use the time to heal, resupply, and prepare for round 2. The command center cleared gradually as pack members returned to their quarters or took up defensive positions. Jack remained beside Sarah's bed, unwilling to leave despite exhaustion pulling at his own consciousness. The mate bond had strengthened during the battle connection deeply as they fought together against combat. He must have dozed off because Wright's urgent voice jerked him awake hours later. Jack, you need to see this. The tablet showed intercepted communications from Volkov's rally point, encrypted channels that Ramirez had finally managed to crack. The Russian was on satellite phone speaking with someone whose authority seemed to exceed even Volkov's considerable power. The council won't be pleased that you've allowed this situation to escalate. The voice was cultured British accent suggesting old money and older power. Elena Moonfire's heir was supposed to be eliminated as a child. Your failure to accomplish that simple task has created complications we'd hoped to avoid. Jack felt cold understanding settling into his bones. The Crescent Valley massacre hadn't been random violence or territorial dispute. It had been sanctioned hit ordered by the Council of Alphas themselves, targeting Sarah specifically because her Moonfire bloodline threatened political balance they'd carefully constructed. Volkov's response carried defensive edge. The girl's father was more competent than intelligence suggested. By the time my team arrived, he'd already hidden her. I tracked her for 3 years before finally acquiring her. And then you failed to kill her, choosing profit over duty. The council member's voice gripped contempt. Now she's manifested full moon fire abilities and bonded with Maddox at Blackridge. You've created exactly the power block we sought to prevent. I can still eliminate them both. Volkov's desperation was showing. Give me 48 hours and additional resources. You've had 15 years and unlimited resources. The council has decided your services are no longer required. Effective immediately, all assets are being transferred to alternative contractors who might prove more competent. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving silence that spoke volumes. Volkov had been cut loose by his patrons, abandoned because he'd failed to eliminate Sarah when she'd been vulnerable child, instead of allowing her to grow into powerful Luna, who'd bonded with one of North America's most dangerous alphas. This changes everything. Marcus had been listening through the command center's speakers, processing implications that went beyond simple territorial dispute. The council ordered Sarah's execution. That means they'll keep sending assets until she's dead, or they've exhausted every resource at their disposal. Jack studied the tactical map with new understanding of strategic situation. Volkov wasn't the threat, he was symptom of larger problem. The Council of Alpha's governing body that supposedly maintained peace and balance across North American supernatural community had decided Sarah's bloodline represented unacceptable concentration of power. They tried to eliminate her as child. When that failed, they'd use Volkov to keep her imprisoned and suppressed, preventing her abilities from manifesting. Now that she'd awakened fully and claimed her birthright, the council would have no choice but to escalate their response. We're at war with the council. Jack spoke the words aloud, making the threat explicit. Not just defending against Volkov's mercenaries, but standing against the most powerful supernatural authority in North America. Sarah woke to find Jack and Marcus engaged in heated tactical discussion maps and intelligence reports spread across every available surface. Her body ached from energy depletion, muscles sore in ways that suggested she'd run marathon while carrying heavy pack. But the IV fluids had restored some measure of strength, and her moonfire abilities were already beginning to regenerate. What did I miss? Her voice was rough from disuse and dehydration. Jack turned relief visible despite his controlled expression. You've been unconscious for 8 hours. Volkov's forces withdrew after taking 73 casualties. We captured communications revealing that the Council of Alphas ordered your execution 15 years ago and has been using Volkov to keep you suppressed. Sarah processed the information with tactical mind that military training had honed sharp. So this isn't about territorial dispute or trafficking profits. This is about eliminating threat to established power structure. Exactly. Marcus pulled up organizational charts showing council membership in their respective territories. You're Elena Moonfire's heir, which means you're potentially more powerful than any 3 council members combined. They see you as existential threat that needs to be neutralized before you can challenge their authority. The politics made sense in brutal way that Sarah recognized from her military service. Power always protected itself, eliminating potential challengers before they could become actual threats. The council had tried to kill her as child when she'd been defenseless. Now that she'd survived and awakened her abilities, they'd keep trying until either she was dead or they'd exhausted every resource at their disposal. So what's our move? Sarah slid off the examination table, despite Wright's protests needing to be part of tactical planning rather than pacification. Do we run? Try to negotiate, prepare for siege. Jack met her eyes with expression that mixed respect and something deeper. We fight. The council started this war 15 years ago when they slaughtered your family. Now we finish it, against the entire Council of Alphas. Even Sarah's considerable combat experience couldn't see path to victory against opponents with that much consolidated power. They control most of North America Command. Thousands of wolves have political connections that reach into human government at highest levels. We don't fight them all at once. Jack's tactical mind was already formulating strategy that played to Blackridge's strengths. We exposed their corruption document that they ordered massacre of innocent pack, prove they have been using Volkov's trafficking network for their own purposes, turn their member packs against them through evidence of criminal conspiracy. Marcus was nodding, seeing how the strategy could work. Most pack members don't know their alphas are involved in trafficking and assassination programs. If we can prove council leadership is corrupt, we split their support base and force them to either reform or face internal rebellion. That requires evidence we don't have. Sarah's practical nature pushed back against optimism that wasn't supported by facts. All we've got is intercepted communication that could be dismissed as fabricated or taken out of context. Then we get more evidence. Jack's voice carried cold certainty that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. Volkov's been keeping records insurance policy in case the council tried to betray him, which they just did. We raid his facilities, extract documentation, and broadcast proof of council corruption across every supernatural network in North America. You want to launch offensive operation against Volkov's remaining forces while simultaneously preparing to defend against council reprisal. Sarah couldn't quite believe she was hearing correctly. That's tactically insane. It's tactically aggressive. Jack corrected her with slight smile. But it's our only move. Defensive posture means waiting for council to bring overwhelming force against us. Offensive action disrupts their timeline, forces them to react to our initiative instead of executing their planned assault. Sarah studied the maps and intelligence reports military training, recognizing truth in Jack's assessment. The best defense was often aggressive defense that kept the enemy off balance and unable to execute their preferred strategy. If Blackridge could seize initiative and control pace of engagement, they might survive long enough to expose council corruption. I'm in. Her voice carried conviction that came from 3 years of captivity, spent planning revenge against everyone who'd kept her imprisoned. But I want frontline position, not relegated to medical support in the rear. You're Luna. Jack's objection was reflexive alpha instinct to protect Maid overriding tactical calculation. You should be I'm combat medic with moonfire abilities. Sarah interrupted with steel in her voice. That makes me force multiplier who needs to be where fighting is heaviest. You can either accept that or spend next 24 hours arguing with someone who's survived worse than anything you're planning. The standoff lasted several seconds before Jack nodded slowly. You've earned the right to choose your own position. Just promise me you won't take unnecessary risks. Define unnecessary. Sarah's dry humor cut through tension that had been building. I'm planning to assault criminal compound run by Russian mob boss who's been enhanced with stolen oil. The entire operation is definitionally unnecessary risk. Marcus laughed despite the situation's gravity. I like her boss. She's got your tactical pessimism without the brooding martyr complex. Planning began immediately, taking advantage of intelligence that Ramirez had gathered during his signals monitoring. Volkov maintained 3 facilities within 200-mile radius of Blackridge Processing Center, where new acquisitions were evaluated, storage facility, where merchandise was held pending sale, and command compound, where Volkov directed his trafficking network. The command compound was target of choice, both because it held documentation they needed and because destroying it would cripple Volkov's operational capability. But it was also most heavily defended, protected by remaining mercenary forces and enhanced security systems that included magical wards designed to prevent supernatural intrusion. We go in tonight before Volkov can reinforce or relocate his records. Jack's plan took shape rapidly, informed by decades of planning similar operations. Small team, fast insertion, extract intelligence, and withdraw before heavy response can be coordinated. Team composition was critical. Too few people, and they'd lack capability to handle unexpected resistance. Too many, and they'd lose speed and stealth advantages. Jack selected himself, Marcus Ramirez, and Chen as core assault team. Williams would provide air support and emergency extraction. Wright would remain at Blackridge coordinating defensive preparations in case Volkov counterattacked while their forces were deployed elsewhere. Sarah pushed herself into the roster through combination of logic and stubbornness that Jack couldn't effectively counter. I can heal combat injuries in real time, which might be difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Plus, my Moonfire abilities can disrupt magical wards that would stop conventional assault team. The logic was sound, even if Jack hated exposing his mate to unnecessary danger. Fine, but you follow tactical discipline and don't take hero risks that get yourself killed trying to save everyone else. Sarah's smile carried edge that suggested she had no intention of following orders that conflicted with her judgment. Of course, Alpha. I'll be model of tactical restraint. Marcus snorted but said nothing, recognizing dynamic that was developing between his Alpha and their new Luna. They operated as equals despite power differential that traditional pack structure would have created. Sarah refused to be protected, and Jack respected her competence enough not to insist on protection she didn't want. The insertion plan was straightforward: helicopter flight to within 5 miles of Volkov's compound, overland approach on foot to avoid detection, breach perimeter under cover of darkness, extract intelligence, and withdraw before heavy forces could respond. Simple in theory, but complicated by hundreds of variables that could transform straightforward raid into desperate fighting withdrawal. They deployed at 2200 hours, Williams piloting Black Hawk, that Blackridge maintained for exactly this kind of operation. The flight was low and fast terrain following profile that kept them beneath radar coverage, while minimizing time enemy forces had to prepare defenses. Chen handled weapons distribution with efficiency of someone who'd conducted similar briefings dozens of times. Suppressed firearms for stealth kills, shaped charges for breaching reinforced positions, incendiary devices for destroying records if extraction proved impossible. Everyone carried trauma kits and backup communication equipment in case primary systems failed. Sarah accepted her loadout without complaint, checking weapons and equipment with practiced competence that came from airborne training. She'd added medical supplies beyond standard trauma kit: bandages, tourniquets, emergency drugs for treating injuries that exceeded her Moonfire healing capacity. The helicopter insertion went smoothly, Williams putting them down and clearing 5 miles from Volkov's compound before immediately extracting to standby position. The team moved through forest with tactical spacing and night vision, rendering darkness into shades of green, every wolf's enhanced senses alert for potential threats. Ramirez led navigation using GPS coordinates cross-referenced with satellite imagery to avoid patrol routes and sensor networks. Chen handled point security, weapon sweeping, potential threat vectors, while rest of team maintained 360-degree awareness. Marcus covered rear security, ensuring no enemies approached from behind. Jack and Sarah moved in middle of formation, Alpha and Luna operating as command element that could respond to contact from any direction. The mate bond hummed between them, allowing silent communication through emotional impressions that were faster than radio transmissions. Compound perimeter appeared after 40 minutes of careful movement, chain link fence topped with razor wire surrounding cluster of warehouses and office buildings. Magical wards shimmered at the edge of Sarah's Moonfire perception. Defensive enchantments designed to alert security forces if supernatural beings attempted to cross threshold. Can you suppress the wards without triggering alarms? Jack kept his voice to barely audible whisper, trusting Sarah's enhanced hearing to pick up the words. She extended her Moonfire senses, feeling out the magical structure that protected Volkov's compound. The wards were sophisticated work, probably crafted by specialist witch hired specifically for this purpose. But they operated on principles of exclusion, identifying supernatural signatures and triggering alerts when those signatures crossed defined boundaries. Sarah's Moonfire abilities worked differently, existing at frequency that wards couldn't easily categorize. She wasn't demon or hostile spirit or corrupted magic user. She was healer restoration force, operating on principles of creation rather than destruction. Give me 90 seconds. She closed her eyes, reaching out with power that had been growing stronger throughout the day. The wards resisted, initially recognizing intrusion attempt and preparing to sound alarms. But Sarah didn't force her way through. Instead, she harmonized with the underlying magical structure, convincing the wards that she represented no threat. The boundary dissolved like morning mist, protective enchantments, recognizing Luna's authority and yielding passage. Sarah opened her eyes, feeling sweat beating despite cool night air. We're clear. Move fast before the wards reset. The team crossed perimeter in tactical rush, reaching cover of nearest warehouse before magical defenses could reassert themselves. Ramirez immediately began electronic warfare against security cameras and motion sensors, feeding false data that showed empty grounds rather than infiltrating assault team. Chen placed shaped charges on warehouse door, precise calculations, ensuring breach would be quiet enough not to alert distant guards. The explosion was muffled crack rather than thunderous detonation, blowing lock assembly while leaving door mostly intact. They flowed through the breach with practiced efficiency weapons, tracking potential threats, while clearing rooms in sequential order. The warehouse held merchandise-caged wolves awaiting transport to auction houses, prisoners who stared at tactical team with mixture of hope and terror. Sarah's heart clenched seeing conditions that were identical to what she endured for 3 years. These people needed immediate rescue, but operational priorities demanded focusing on primary objective. Intelligence extraction, first prisoner, liberation second if time permitted. Marcus gestured towards stairs leading to second floor where Volkov maintained his office space. Command center is up there according to building schematics. That's where records should be stored. The tactical team advanced upstairs with Chen on point, weapon tracking corners and doorways where threats might materialize. They reached the second floor without contact entering corridor, lined with offices that suggested legitimate business rather than criminal enterprise. Volkov's personal office was at corridor's end, reinforced door that spoke to paranoia earned through decades operating in criminal underworld. Chen examined the lock mechanism with professional assessment, identifying electronic components mixed with magical wards that created layered security. This is going to take time. He pulled tools from tactical vest, preparing to bypass security through combination of technical skill and brute force. We don't have time. Sarah stepped forward, her moonfire abilities reaching out to touch the wards protecting Volkov's sanctum. These enchantments were different from perimeter defenses actively hostile, rather than merely alert trickery designed to harm intruders, rather than simply detect them. But Sarah's power operated on fundamental principle that healing could overcome harm, that restoration was more powerful than destruction. She poured energy into the wards, not fighting them, but transforming them, converting hostile magic into neutral energy that dissipated harmlessly. The door unlocked with audible click. Security defeated by Luna, who refused to accept that any barrier could be truly impenetrable. Remind me never to piss her off. Chen's voice carried genuine respect, mixed with healthy wariness of someone who understood how dangerous Sarah could be if provoked. The office interior looked like legitimate businessman's workspace, mahogany desk, leather chairs, artwork, that probably cost more than most people earned in years. But the safe built into far wall spoke to darker purposes, reinforced steel protecting contents that Volkov couldn't risk losing. Ramirez set up portable computer station preparing to crack safe's electronic lock through combination of hacking and brute force algorithms. While he worked, the rest of the team established defensive perimeter, preparing for possibility that security might discover their intrusion. Sarah moved to desk, searching through papers and digital files that Volkov had left accessible. Most were legitimate business records, shipping manifests, financial statements, employee rosters that could have belonged to any logistics company. But hidden folders revealed darker operations, coded references to merchandise acquisition and distribution networks. Jack, look at this. She pulled up file that contained photographs and documentation spanning 15 years. It's evidence of council involvement in trafficking operations, payment records, showing deposits from multiple Alpha territories. The intelligence was damning proof that council members had been using Volkov's network for their own purposes, hiding behind plausible deniability while profiting from suffering they publicly condemned. Names, dates, transactions that created paper trail leading directly to Alphas who sat on governing council. Download everything. Jack's voice was tight with controlled fury, seeing confirmation of corruption that went far deeper than simple assassination order. We're going to burn the entire system down. Ramirez worked rapidly copying files to encrypted drives while his algorithms chipped away at safe security. The process took 8 minutes, far longer than comfortable for team operating deep in hostile territory. But finally the safe door swung open, revealing physical documents that Volkov had kept as insurance against betrayal. Jack flipped through folders, rapidly seeing handwritten contracts, signed authorizations, photographic evidence of Council Alphas meeting with known traffickers. The documentation was comprehensive, suggesting Volkov had spent years building leverage against the power structure he served. This is checkmate, Marcus spoke quietly, understanding implications of evidence they just acquired. We broadcast this across supernatural networks, and Council loses all legitimacy. Their member packs will rebel rather than follow leadership this corrupt, assuming we survive long enough to broadcast it. Chen's pragmatic assessment cut through optimism, reminding them they were still inside enemy compound, with extraction incomplete. The alarm began wailing before anyone could respond. Klaxons shattering night silence, and announcing that security had finally detected intrusion. Lights flooded the compound, shadows vanishing as emergency protocols activated defensive measures. Contact West perimeter. Ramirez monitored security frequencies while gathering equipment. Estimate 20 hostiles converging on warehouse. We need to move now. The tactical team descended stairs rapidly, abandoning stealth for speed as their presence was already compromised. They reached warehouse floor to find prisoners staring at them with desperate hope, understanding that rescue was possible if only these warriors could fight their way through whatever forces were responding. Sarah made split-second decision that would complicate extraction, but aligned with who she'd become. We're taking them, all of them. Nobody gets left behind. Jack started to object, adding 40 prisoners to extraction would be tactical nightmare. But seeing Sarah's expression changed his mind. She'd spent 3 years as prisoner herself, knew intimately what abandonment felt like. If she needed to rescue these people for her own healing, he wouldn't deny her that choice. Everyone who can walk, follow us. Jack's alpha command carried authority that prisoners responded to instinctively. Anyone too injured to move gets carried. We're leaving together or not at all. Chen blew the warehouse's loading bay doors, creating exit point large enough for mass evacuation. The team formed protective cordons around prisoners, weapons tracking threats, while Sarah used moonfire abilities to heal the most severely injured until they could manage evacuation pace. Volkov's security forces opened fire from multiple positions, automatic weapons stitching through cargo containers and concrete walls. Chen returned fire with disciplined bursts, forcing attackers into cover, while rest of teams shepherded prisoners toward treeline where Williams would conduct emergency extraction. Marcus took round to the thigh Kevlar, stopping the bullet, but kinetic impact shattering femur. He went down hard, weapon clattering away as shock overwhelmed his system. Sarah was beside him instantly, healing energy flowing through contact, while enemy fire continued impacting around them. The bone knit together within seconds, muscle and tissue restoring themselves until Marcus could regain his feet. He retrieved his weapon and resumed covering fire without missing more than 5 seconds of combat effectiveness, living testament to Sarah's capabilities. Williams brought the helicopter in low and fast door gunner, providing suppressive fire that forced Volkov's people into cover. The extraction was chaos, prisoners climbing aboard while tactical team maintained perimeter defense. Everyone trying to reach safety before overwhelming force could prevent withdrawal. Sarah was last aboard, ensuring every prisoner had made it to helicopter before abandoning her position. Volkov's forces pressed close, recognizing that their targets were escaping and desperate to prevent loss of valuable merchandise. We're at capacity, Williams's voice carried through helmet communication. Weight limits are maxed, and I've got damage to tail rotor. This is going to be interesting flight. Then let's not waste time discussing it. Jack hauled Sarah aboard as Chen tossed final smoke grenades to cover their departure. Get us airborne now. The helicopter lifted with agonizing slowness, overloaded with people, and taking fire from ground positions. Rounds impacted against armored fuselage, some penetrating cabin, and forcing passengers to duck flying fragments. The door gunner returned fire until his weapon ran dry, then switched to backup rifle and continued engaging targets. They cleared the compound with meters to spare damaged tail rotor, creating vibration that suggested catastrophic failure was imminent possibility. Williams fought controls with decades of piloting experience, nursing crippled aircraft toward Black Ridge territory, while everyone aboard held collective breath. The landing was controlled crash more than a proper touchdown, the helicopter hitting ground hard enough to collapse landing gear and send everyone tumbling. But they were down in friendly territory, surrounded by Black Ridge defenders who'd responded to emergency beacon alive despite odds that should have killed them multiple times over. Sarah emerged from wreckage on unsteady legs using moonfire abilities to heal injuries that 40 people had sustained during extraction. Broken bones, gunshot wounds, burns from hot metal, all of it flowed through her consciousness as she worked to restore health to everyone who'd risked everything for strangers' freedom. Jack watched her work with expression mixing pride and concern, seeing how much energy she was expending without regard for her own limitations. She was burning through reserves again, pushing past safe boundaries because people needed healing, and she couldn't accept allowing them to suffer. When last injury was treated and rescued, prisoners were being escorted to medical facilities. Sarah finally collapsed. Jack caught her as consciousness fled mate bond, conveying exhaustion that went beyond physical into something approaching spiritual depletion. Wright appeared with medical equipment, already preparing IV fluids and monitoring gear. She did it again, gave everything until nothing remained. This can't keep happening, Jack. Eventually she'll push too hard and burn herself out permanently. Then we end this. Jack looked toward Command Center where intelligence they'd extracted from Volkov's compound waited to be analyzed and broadcast. The Council started this war, and Sarah's been paying the price for 15 years. Time we finished it and gave her chance to rest. The documentation was even more damning than initial review had suggested. Volkov had kept meticulous records spanning 2 decades, creating comprehensive record of Council corruption that included names, dates, transaction details, and photographic evidence of crimes that violated every principle supernatural community claimed to uphold. Marcus coordinated with Ramirez to prepare broadcast package that would disseminate across every supernatural communication network simultaneously. They couldn't afford to allow Council time to suppress evidence or craft counter-narrative the information needed to reach every pack, every clan, every supernatural being in North America before damage control could be attempted. Upload will take approximately 4 hours to reach all targeted networks. Ramirez worked keyboard rapidly, establishing encrypted connections and redundant pathways that would ensure delivery, even if Council attempted to block transmission. Once it starts, there's no stopping it. Every Alpha, every Luna, every pack member with network access will have complete documentation of Council corruption. Do it. Jack's authorization was simple, but carried weight of declaration of war against most powerful supernatural authority in North America. Send the evidence and let every wolf decide whether they want to keep following leadership this corrupt. The upload began at 0300 hours, massive data package flowing across encrypted networks toward thousands of recipients. Initial responses came within minutes, shocked messages from alphas who'd had no idea their Council representatives were involved in trafficking and assassination programs. Disbelief transformed into rage as documentation proved beyond doubt that corruption existed at highest levels of supernatural governance. By dawn, the supernatural world was in chaos. Packs across North America were demanding answers from their Council representatives, questioning authority of leadership that had violated every principle they claimed to uphold. Some Council members attempted to deny it, but documentation was too comprehensive to dismiss. Others tried to justify their actions as necessary for maintaining order, which only inflamed anger directed at them. The Council of Alpha's governing body that had maintained power for 3 generations was fracturing under weight of exposed corruption. Member packs were withdrawing support, declaring independence from authority structure they no longer trusted. Within 24 hours, the Council had lost effective control of half their territories, with more defections happening hourly. Sarah woke to find the supernatural world transformed power structure that had ordered her execution now collapsing under weight of its own corruption. Jack sat beside her, bed exhaustion visible despite Alpha discipline that usually masked such weakness. You did it. Her voice was rough from disuse. You exposed them. We did it. Jack took her handmate bond, conveying emotions too complex for words alone. You survived everything they threw at you, stayed strong enough to help rescue Operation Succeed, gave us evidence we needed to bring them down. This victory belongs to you as much as anyone. Sarah processed information while her unified abilities slowly regenerated power. Returning at glacial pace suggested Wright's warnings about permanent depletion weren't exaggeration. What happens now? Now we prepare for final confrontation. Jack's voice carried weight of someone who understood that exposing corruption didn't eliminate threat it represented. Council's collapsing, but some members will try to maintain power through force. Volkov's still out there with remaining mercenary forces, and we've made enemies of every Alpha who profited from trafficking networks. So basically, nothing's changed except now everyone wants us dead. Sarah's dry humor cut through tension in the room. Welcome to leadership. Jack's slight smile suggested he appreciated her ability to find humor despite circumstances. It's thankless work that mostly involves making impossible choices and hoping you survive long enough to see if they were right decisions. The final assault came at dawn on Sarah's 33rd birthday, exactly as ancient prophecy had predicted. Volkov arrived with everything he had left, 60 mercenaries, enhanced troops, whose augmentation had been restored through emergency procedures, in desperation of man who lost everything and had nothing left to lose. But this time Blackridge was ready. The perimeter sensors began screaming at 0500 thermal signatures, blooming across tactical displays like malignant flowers. Jack studied the patterns with combat veteran's eye, recognizing coordinated assault that spoke to professional military planning rather than desperate last stand. Volkov had learned from previous failures, adapted his tactics, and was coming with everything he had left. 60 contacts converging from 3 vectors simultaneously. Marcus coordinated defensive responses while pulling up satellite imagery that showed enemy force composition. Enhanced troops leading each assault wave, regular mercenaries providing support, fire heavy weapons teams positioned to suppress our defensive positions. Sarah stood in command center wearing tactical vest over borrowed fatigues, moonfire abilities fully regenerated after 2 days of enforced rest. Her hands glowed faintly with silver light power, responding to adrenaline in combat proximity. The mate bond hummed between her and Jack, connection that had grown stronger with each shared trial. Today was her 33rd birthday, the age when moonfire abilities traditionally reached full maturity, when lunar potential crystallized into actual authority that transcended normal pack items. She could feel the change happening within her consciousness, channels opening that had remained dormant her entire life, awareness expanding to encompass every living being within miles. The power was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. Sarah understood now why the council had feared her bloodline enough to order wholesale slaughter. Elena Moonfire hadn't just been powerful Luna, she'd been force of nature that could reshape battlefields through presence alone, whose very existence had threatened established order. Chen's voice cut through tactical chatter with urgency that made everyone's attention snap toward him. "Boss, we've got additional contacts. Unknown force approaching from northwest, estimate 40 vehicles. Heavy armor signature suggests military hardware." Jack's jaw tightened as new threat materialized on displays. The council was making their move while Blackridge was engaged with Volkov's assault, timing their intervention to catch defenders when they were most vulnerable. Smart tactics that would have worked against conventional opponents. But Blackridge had Sarah, and Sarah's abilities were growing exponentially with each passing hour. "I can feel it." Her voice carried distant quality consciousness, extending through pack bonds and beyond into territory that should have been impossible to perceive. Every wolf within 50 miles. Their fear, their pain, their determination. Some of them don't want to be here. They're following council orders, but questioning whether this fight is justified. Can you communicate with them? Jack was already calculating implications if Sarah could turn council forces against their leadership through direct telepathic contact. She closed her eyes, reaching out with moonfire consciousness toward wolves advancing under council banners. The connection formed reluctantly, warriors conditioned to resist mental intrusion, instinctively defending against perceived attack. But Sarah wasn't attacking. She was offering truth, broadcasting evidence of council corruption directly into their minds, where denial became impossible. Images flooded across mental link, documentation of trafficking operations, photographs of council alphas meeting with the Volkov transaction records proving years of criminal conspiracy. Every piece of evidence they'd extracted from Volkov's compound transmitted with emotional context that made corruption visceral and undeniable. The council forces advanced faltered as warriors processed information that contradicted everything their leadership had told them. Some continued forward out of loyalty or momentum, but others slowed or stopped, entirely unwilling to kill for alphas whose legitimacy had been shattered by comprehensive proof of betrayal. "We've got defections." Ramirez monitored communication frequencies with disbelief evident in his voice. 3 council contingents just withdrew from assault formation. Their commanders are demanding explanation from Alpha leadership about documented evidence of trafficking involvement. The tactical situation was still desperate. Volkov's 60 mercenaries plus remaining council forces still outnumbered Blackridge defenders significantly, but psychological edge had shifted. Council warriors were questioning their mission, while Blackridge Pack fought with absolute conviction that their cause was righteous. All defensive positions, weapons free. Jack's authorization released Blackridge wolves to engage with full lethality, no more warning shots or attempts at de-escalation. Volkov wants war. We'll give him war. He won't survive. The battle erupted across compound perimeter with intensity that made previous engagements seem like skirmishes. Volkov's enhanced troops hit defensive positions with superhuman strength and speed, absorbing damage that should have stopped them while pressing forward through gaps in Black Ridge lines. Regular mercenaries provided supporting, fire-keeping defenders pinned, while assault teams advanced toward command center. Chen's demolition teams detonated prepared charges, collapsing approach corridors, and channeling attackers into kill zones where overlapping fields of fire created meat grinder that chewed through enemy forces. But Volkov had anticipated defensive tactics, bringing shaped charges that blasted through reinforced positions and created new breach points faster than defenders could respond. Sarah worked frantically, healing wounded pack members as injuries accumulated faster than normal regeneration could handle. Her Moonfire abilities had grown strong enough to work at distance now, consciousness touching multiple wolves simultaneously and restoring combat effectiveness without requiring physical contact. But the strain was enormous energy expenditure that would have killed normal Luna within minutes. Sarah pushed through exhaustion and pain, refusing to let pack members die when she possessed power to save them. Marcus went down hard when the enhanced soldier's claws opened his throat. Arterial spray painting, concrete thread with his life pumped out in rhythmic spurts. Sarah's healing reached him instantly, sealing torn blood vessels and reconstructing damaged tissue before fatal blood loss could occur. Marcus surged back to his feet, shifted to wolf form, and tore out the enhanced soldier's throat with savage efficiency. The tactical displays showed Black Ridge lines holding despite overwhelming pressure, defenders buying time through disciplined violence that maximized enemy casualties while minimizing their own losses. But it was war of attrition that favored attackers. Volkov could afford losses that would cripple Black Ridge, trading 3 mercenaries for every defender killed and still coming out ahead numerically. We can't sustain this. Marcus's assessment was brutally honest, delivered between bursts of covering fire. We're burning through ammunition faster than we can resupply. Defensive positions are collapsing, and Sarah's going to burn herself out trying to keep everyone alive. Jack studied the tactical situation with cold calculation that had kept him alive through dozens of impossible engagements. Marcus was right. Conventional defense would fail, eventually numbers and resources favoring attackers who could accept casualty rates that would devastate Black Ridge Pack. They needed force multiplier, tactical advantage that would shift engagement dynamics in defenders' favor. And that advantage stood beside him, glowing with silver light that grew brighter with each passing moment as her 33rd birthday progressed toward hour of her actual birth. Sir, how much power do you have available? Jack's question carried weight of decision he was preparing to make. She assessed her reserves honestly, feeling Moonfire abilities that had been regenerating throughout the night. More than I've ever had before. It's like someone opened floodgates that were holding back ocean. I could heal every wolf in this compound simultaneously right now, or what Jack heard possibility in her hesitation. Or I could do something else. Sarah's consciousness was touching possibilities that ancient Moonfire Lunas had explored techniques that required power beyond what normal wolves could channel. I can feel the enhanced soldier's corruption, the stolen genetics that Volkov used to create them. What if I could purge that corruption on massive scale? You'd turn Volkov's super soldiers back into regular humans in mid-combat. Marcus grasped implications immediately. 60 enhanced troops would become 60 baseline mercenaries without supernatural advantages. That would eliminate their primary tactical edge. But attempting purification on that scale might kill you. Jack voiced concern that tactical part of his mind knew was relevant, but emotional side refused to accept. We're talking about channeling more power than any Luna has used in generations. Sarah met his eyes with determination that reminded him painfully of her father's last stand. I didn't survive 3 years of hell just to hide and bunker while people fight for my freedom. This is my battle as much as yours. Let me fight it. The mate bond conveyed absolute conviction and warrior spirit that matched Jack's own refusal to yield when survival demanded impossible courage. He recognized that Sarah would attempt the purification, whether he authorized it or not. Her nature demanded action over passivity, that she contribute everything she possessed toward collective survival. Do it. Jack's authorization was simultaneously tactical calculation and active faith in his mate's capabilities. But the moment you feel yourself approaching limits, you stop. I won't have you burning yourself out permanently to save rest of us. Sarah's smile carried fierce joy of warrior finally passing. I'll be careful. Right after I strip away every advantage Volkov thinks he has. She moved to compound's highest point, positioning herself where line of sight extended across the entire battlefield. Her Moonfire abilities had been growing throughout conversation power building toward critical threshold as birthday hour approached. The ancient text suggested Moonfire Lunas experienced transcendent moment at exact hour of their birth temporary surge that pushed capabilities beyond sustainable levels. Sarah didn't know her exact birth time, but instinct suggested it was imminent power swelling within her consciousness, like tide reaching its peak before inevitable recession. Now, the single word carried absolute certainty as her awareness exploded outward, Moonfire consciousness touching every enhanced soldier simultaneously. She could feel their corruption, intimately stolen werewolf genetics, grafted onto human DNA, creating unstable hybrid that granted supernatural abilities at cost of eventual cellular breakdown. Volkov's enhancement process was crude butchery compared to natural werewolf biology, forcing changes that bodies were never designed to accommodate. The enhanced soldiers lived in constant pain, supernatural strength purchased through systematic destruction of their own cellular structure. Sarah's power flowed across battlefield like purifying tide reaching into corrupted genetics and restoring original human biology. Enhanced soldiers screamed as artificial advantages were torn away, superhuman strength vanishing and leaving them weak and disoriented. Some collapsed immediately, bodies unable to handle sudden transformation. Others stumbled, trying to maintain combat effectiveness while their enhanced abilities drained away like water through shattered dam. The tactical situation reversed within seconds. Volkov's primary advantage, enhanced troops who could match werewolves in close combat, had been eliminated through single coordinated application of Moonfire abilities. The assault that should have overwhelmed Blackridge defenses stalled completely as attackers realized their supernatural edge had vanished. What just happened? Volkov's voice cut through captured radio frequencies, confusion and rage evident, despite his normally controlled demeanor. All enhanced units are reporting capability loss. Did you hit them with some kind of weapon? That's called fighting smarter instead of harder. Jack's response was broadcast on open channel, ensuring every mercenary heard Alpha's voice. Your science experiment just got purged by Luna, who's forgotten more about genetics than you'll ever understand. Tell your people to withdraw while they still can. Volkov's laugh was bitter sound that spoke to man who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. You think I came here planning to survive? I'm already dead. Council cut me loose. My organization is destroyed. My reputation is ruined. But I'm taking you with me, Maddox. The helicopter appeared from behind Mountain Ridge Russian Mi-17 that had somehow avoided detection during approach. Door gunner opened fire immediately, heavy machine guns stitching through compound with devastating effect. 3 Blackridge defenders went down before anyone could respond, bodies torn apart by high-caliber rounds. Sarah's healing couldn't help them. The damage was too catastrophic, death arriving before her power could prevent it. The first permanent casualties Blackridge had suffered, fallen because she hadn't sensed threat quickly enough. Grief and rage flooded through her in equal measure, Moonfire abilities responding to emotional surge by amplifying beyond anything she channeled. Silver light erupted from her body with force that shattered windows and cracked concrete power that had been building all morning, finally expressing itself without restraint or control. The helicopter's machine gun fell silent as door gunner was thrown backward by invisible force wind that shouldn't exist in calm morning air, suddenly screaming with hurricane intensity. The Mi-17 pitched sideways pilot fighting controls as supernatural turbulence overwhelmed aircraft stability. Sarah's consciousness reached out with precision that surprised her, finding helicopters' mechanical systems and understanding them at molecular level. Moonfire abilities weren't just healing, they were restoration ability to return things to original state. In helicopters' original state had been components scattered across factory floor, not assembled aircraft. The Mi-17 began disintegrating mid-flight bolts, unscrewing themselves, welds separating entire aircraft. returning to pre-assembly configuration over span of 5 seconds. Volkov's scream cut off abruptly as helicopter became cloud of falling parts, structural integrity failing catastrophically. Jack watched his mate literally unmake aircraft through application of power that should have been impossible, seeing confirmation that Sarah's abilities at full maturity exceeded anything Elena Moonfire had demonstrated in historical accounts. She wasn't just powerful Luna, she was force of nature that could reshape reality according to principles that transcended normal physics. Volkov's body hit ground hard, enhanced biology, that had sustained him through decades of violence, finally failing against impact trauma that no amount of stolen genetics could survive. The Russian trafficking kingpin who'd terrorized supernatural community for 20 years died screaming, legacy of corruption ending in Montana wilderness far from empire he'd built. His remaining mercenaries broke immediately professional soldiers, recognizing when tactical situation had become unwinnable. They withdrew in good order, covering retreat with disciplined fire, but no longer pressing assault that had been rendered pointless by their employer's death. The council forces that hadn't already defected followed suit, commanders unwilling to continue engagement that lacked clear authorization or legitimate purpose. Within 10 minutes, battlefield fell silent, except for moaning of wounded and crackle of fires burning across compound. Black Ridge had survived, but at costs that made victory feel hollow. 3 pack members lay dead casualties that Sarah's abilities hadn't been able to prevent. Another dozen were seriously wounded despite her healing efforts. The compound was devastated. Structures damaged beyond immediate repair, defensive positions shattered. But they'd won. Volkov was dead, his trafficking network destroyed, council exposed, and fracturing under weight of documented corruption. The war that had started 15 years ago, with massacre of innocent pack, had finally ended with justice delivered through combination of tactical competence and supernatural power that refused to accept defeat. Sarah collapsed as adrenaline-faded consciousness retreating from expanded awareness that had encompassed entire battlefield. Jack caught her before she hit ground, feeling through mate bond how close she'd come to burning herself out permanently. The power surge associated with her birthday hour was fading, Moonfire abilities receding to sustainable levels and that wouldn't kill her through simple use. Wright appeared with medical team already preparing treatment for Luna, who'd pushed far beyond safe limits. She's in critical energy debt. Her body temperature is 106 degrees, heart rate is through the roof, and her cellular structure is showing stress fractures from channeling more power than physical form was designed to handle. Will she survive? Jack's voice was carefully controlled, alpha discipline, preventing panic from overwhelming tactical assessment of situation. If she rests completely for the next week, avoids using any Moonfire abilities, and lets her metabolism recover naturally, probably. Wright's honesty was brutal but necessary. Push her again before she's fully healed, and we're looking at permanent damage or death. Jack carried Sarah to medical facility, personally refusing to delegate responsibility for mate's care to anyone else. The mate bond conveyed her unconscious state, dreams troubled by images of 3 pack members she hadn't been able to save, guilt that would haunt her, despite rational understanding that some deaths occurred too quickly for any intervention. The aftermath of battle stretched across days as Black Ridge pack recovered from engagement that had tested them to breaking point. Chen coordinated reconstruction efforts, rebuilding defensive positions, and repairing damaged structures. Marcus handled diplomatic communications, fielding messages from dozens of packs who wanted to understand what had happened and where they stood in new power structure emerging from council's collapse. Ramirez monitored supernatural communication networks, tracking spread of documentation that continued exposing council corruption. The evidence had reached every corner of North American supernatural community, sparking debates about governance and accountability that would reshape pack politics for generations. Williams flew reconnaissance missions, ensuring no additional threats were mobilizing, while Black Ridge remained vulnerable. The skies stayed clear, surviving council members were too busy dealing with internal rebellions to threaten anyone else, and Volkov's death had created power vacuum in trafficking networks that would take months to fill. Sarah woke on the 3rd day to find Jack sitting beside her, exhaustion visible despite Alpha's usual controlled demeanor. His hand held hers, mate bond providing anchor that had kept her consciousness from fragmenting during recovery period. How bad was it? Her voice was rough from disuse, throat raw from screaming she didn't remember. You disassembled helicopter in mid-flight through application of moonfire abilities that shouldn't be possible according to every historical account we have. Jack's tone mixed awe with concern. Then you collapsed and spent 3 days unconscious, while your body tried to recover from channeling enough power to fundamentally alter reality. In the win, the question was simple, but carried weight of 3 years captivity and 15 years of council persecution. Volkov's dead. His trafficking network is destroyed. Council has lost effective control of half their territories and the rest are demanding reforms or threatening rebellion. Jack's summary was clinical, but satisfaction underneath suggested deep approval of outcomes. You changed everything, Sarah. The supernatural world will never be the same. She processed information while her moonfire abilities slowly regenerated power returning, but feeling different now, more controlled, less likely to surge beyond her capacity to manage. The birthday awakening had been transcendent experience, temporary access to capabilities beyond normal limits. But now that surge had faded, leaving her with sustainable power level that was still impressive, but no longer reality warping. What about our casualties? Sarah remembered 3 pack members falling, despite her best efforts. Guilt that had haunted her dreams. Marcus entered medical facility before Jack could respond, moving with ease that suggested complete recovery from throat wound that should have killed him. 3 dead, 12, seriously wounded but all recovering, thanks to your intervention. Without your healing abilities, we'd have lost 20 or 30 more. The mathematics didn't ease Sarah's guilt. 3 deaths felt like personal failure, despite rational understanding that she'd saved dozens of others. Jack seemed to sense her emotional state through mate bond, squeezing her hand with gentle pressure. You can't save everyone. His voice carried hard-won wisdom of someone who'd lost entire packs and learned to live with survivor's guilt. Trust me, I've spent 15 years trying to protect every wolf under my authority, and I still lose people. The best we can do is minimize casualties and honor those who fall by living well enough to justify their sacrifice. Sarah nodded slowly, accepting truth even as emotions struggled to align with rational understanding. She'd need time to process everything that had happened, to integrate experiences that had compressed years of development into days of intense combat. There's something else you should know. Marcus pulled up tablets showing messages that had been flooding Black Ridge communication systems. Packs across North America are requesting your presence. They want to meet Luna, who exposed council corruption and defeated Volkov. Some are asking if you consider mediating disputes or providing healing. You're becoming symbol. Jack's observation carried mixed feelings, pride in his mate's accomplishments, balanced against concern for her well-being. Every pack that breaks from council sees you as alternative authority structure. Luna, who proved corruption, could be challenged and defeated. I don't want to be symbol. Sarah's protest was immediate and heartfelt. I just wanted to survive and make Volkov pay for what he did to me. Too late. Marcus's smile suggested sympathy mixed with inevitability. You're Elena Moonfire's heir who manifested full abilities and used them to reshape North American supernatural politics. Like it or not, you've become figurehead for everyone who wants change. The implications were overwhelming. Future stretching ahead, filled with responsibilities Sarah hadn't anticipated or desired. She'd survive captivity by focusing on immediate goals, escape, revenge, survival without considering what would come after those objectives were achieved. Now she was free, powerful, mated to Alpha, who commanded respect across multiple territories, and apparently positioned to become political force in supernatural communities reconstruction. The weight of expectation felt heavier than the silver chains had ever been. Jack seemed to sense her distress through mate bond, pulling her close with careful attention to injuries still healing. We'll figure it out together. You don't have to make decisions about future right now. Focus on recovering. Let me handle politics and diplomacy until you are ready. What if I'm never ready? Sarah voiced fear that had been growing since she'd witnessed extent of her own power. I'm combat medic who got promoted way above her competence level. I don't know how to be Luna, how to lead, how to make decisions that affect thousands of lives. You learn. Jack's response was matter-of-fact, drawing on decades of leadership experience. Same way I learned to be Alpha after Kosovo deployment destroyed my ability to trust my own judgment. You make decisions, live with consequences, adjust strategy based on outcomes. Nobody's born knowing how to lead. It's skill developed through trial and error. Marcus cleared his throat diplomatically. If it helps, you've already demonstrated most important leadership quality, willingness to sacrifice yourself for people depending on you. Everything else can be taught. Sarah appreciated their support, even as doubt continued gnawing at her confidence. The transition from prisoner to Luna had happened too quickly, compressing character development that should have occurred over years into days of intense trial. She felt like an imposter wearing authority that belonged to someone more qualified. But pack members who visited medical facility over following days treated her with respect that seemed genuine rather than obligatory. They thanked her for healing that had saved their lives, shared stories about how her exposure of council corruption had given them hope that system could change, expressed loyalty that felt earned rather than demanded. Slowly, Sarah began understanding that leadership wasn't about perfection or comprehensive knowledge. It was about showing up when people needed you, making best decisions possible with limited information, and maintaining conviction that better future was achievable despite present obstacles. 2 weeks after Volkov's death, Council of Alphas officially dissolved as governing authority. The structure that had maintained order across North America for 3 generations collapsed under weight of exposed corruption and internal rebellion. Member packs declared independence, forming regional alliances based on shared values rather than hierarchical authority. The power vacuum created chaos. Territorial disputes erupted in regions where council had been enforcing peace. Old grudges resurfaced without neutral arbiter to mediate conflicts. Criminal enterprises expanded into spaces that legitimate authority had abandoned. But new structures were emerging from chaos built on principles of transparency and accountability that council had claimed to uphold but systematically violated. Pack leaders who'd proven themselves trustworthy during crisis were forming coalitions, creating governance frameworks that distributed power rather than concentrating it in hands of small elite. And increasingly, those leaders were looking to Blackridge for guidance, asking Jack and Sarah to participate in discussions about how supernatural community should organize itself going forward. The invitation to speak at Continental Assembly arrived 3 weeks after the battle formal request from Coalition of Alphas, who were attempting to establish new governance structure. They wanted Luna, who'd exposed corruption, to explain her vision for supernatural community's future, to inspire wolves who were struggling to imagine alternatives to hierarchical systems that had failed them. Sarah read invitation with mixture of terror and reluctance, looking to Jack for guidance about whether she should accept. It's your decision. He was careful not to influence her choice, respecting autonomy that she fought hard to claim. But I think you have things worth saying, perspectives that most alphas lack because they have never experienced powerlessness. What would I even talk about? Sarah couldn't imagine standing before hundreds of alphas and speaking with authority she didn't feel. Tell them truth. Jack's advice was simple but profound. Talk about what you survived. What you learned, how power structures that seem immutable can be challenged when enough people refuse to accept injustice. They don't need polished speech. They need authentic voice that reminds them while they're rebuilding. The Continental Assembly convened in neutral territory, massive gathering of supernatural leadership and attempting to chart course forward. Sarah stood backstage feeling nausea that had nothing to do with physical illness, watching through monitors as alphas filed into convention center and took seats that would determine North American pack politics for next generation. Jack squeezed her hand, mate bond conveying confidence, even as Sarah's own doubts threatened to overwhelm her resolve. You survived 3 years of torture without breaking. You faced down Volkov and council both. Speaking to audience is nothing compared to what you've already overcome. Easy for you to say. Sarah's attempt at humor fell flat, voice shaking with anxiety that no amount of pep talk could fully dispel. The introduction was brief, Marcus explaining Sarah's background, her exposure of council corruption, her demonstration of moonfire abilities that had helped end Volkov's reign of terror. Then it was her turn, walking onto stage before hundreds of wolves whose respect she hadn't earned and authority she didn't feel qualified to wield. The lights were blinding audience, a mass of faces that blurred together into indistinct threat. Sarah's military training kicked in automatically when terrified focus on mission parameters and execute according to plan. Her mission was simple: speak truth about power and corruption and survival. I'm not here because I'm wise or experienced or qualified to lead. Her opening words cut through ceremonial atmosphere, honest acknowledgement of limitations rather than false confidence. I'm here because I survived something that should have killed me, and apparently that makes me symbol for everyone trying to rebuild after Council's collapse. The audience shifted attention, focusing as Sarah's authenticity penetrated through formal distance. 3 years ago, I was prisoner of Constantine Volkov, kept in silver cage, and drugged with wolfsbane to prevent me from shifting or accessing my abilities. Every day, I woke up wondering if that would be the day he decided I was more valuable dead than alive. Every night, I went to sleep, not knowing if I'd wake at all. Sarah's voice strengthened as she found rhythm drawing on pain she'd lived through to fuel conviction that others needed to hear. And the entire time I was told this was normal, that some wolves were meant to be owned, that hierarchy existed for good reason, that questioning authority meant challenging natural order. Volkov used those same arguments Council had used for generations, that power concentrated in right hands maintained stability, that questioning leadership led to chaos. But here's what I learned: in that cage, power doesn't care about justifications. It doesn't matter if authority claims to serve greater good or maintain order or protect the weak. What matters is accountability, whether people in power can be challenged when they abuse their authority, whether systems exist to prevent corruption from becoming institutionalized. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word from Luna, who'd experienced powerlessness that most alphas could barely imagine. Council ordered my family killed when I was a child because they feared my bloodline represented threat to their authority. They used Volkov's trafficking network for years while publicly condemning it. They maintained power through systematic violence while claiming to promote peace. And they got away with it because no mechanisms existed to hold them accountable. Sarah paused, letting her words sink in before delivering conclusion that felt both obvious and revolutionary. So as you rebuild, as you create new structures to replace what collapsed, remember this: any system that can't be questioned will eventually become corrupt. Any authority that can't be challenged will eventually become tyrannical. Build accountability into foundation, not as afterthought. Make transparency the default, not exception. Create mechanisms for removing leaders who abuse power, not just structures that concentrate power in fewer hands. She looked across the audience of alphas who'd lived their entire lives within hierarchical systems, seeing recognition dawning in faces that had never questioned fundamental assumptions about how power should be organized. I don't have answers about what specific structures you should build. I'm combat medic, not political philosopher. But I know what it feels like to be powerless, and I know that nobody should have to experience what I survived. If that's worth anything to you, if my perspective as someone who is at bottom of power structure has value, then use it. Build something better than what we lost. The standing ovation started slowly, then built into roar that shook the convention center. Sarah stood on stage feeling overwhelmed by a response she hadn't anticipated seeing in audience faces that suggested her words had resonated beyond anything she'd intended. Jack was waiting backstage when she stumbled off, pulling her into an embrace that spoke to pride beyond what words could convey. That was perfect. Exactly what they needed to hear. I just told them truth. Sarah was still processing that simple honesty had generated response that polished rhetoric couldn't have achieved. Didn't seem that profound. Truth rarely does to persons speaking it. Marcus joined them with tablet, showing social media feeds that were already spreading excerpts from Sarah's speech across supernatural networks. But to people who've spent their lives being told comfortable lies, honest accounting of reality is revolutionary. The days following Continental Assembly brought a flood of requests that threatened to overwhelm Blackridge's administrative capacity. PAX wanted Sarah to visit to provide healing for their wounds, to mediate disputes that had festered during Council's corrupt oversight. Alpha sought guidance about governance structures, asking Luna who challenged authority, how they should wield their own power responsibly. Sarah was drowning in expectations she'd never wanted, obligations that felt crushing despite good intentions behind them. She'd survived captivity by focusing narrowly on immediate survival. Suddenly, she was expected to consider needs of thousands of wolves across an entire continent. The breaking point came 3 weeks after assembly, when Sarah found herself unable to leave medical facility because constant stream of visitors seeking healing or guidance made privacy impossible. She'd become prisoner again, not of silver chains, but of expectations and obligations that felt equally confining. Jack found her crying in supply closet, the only space where she could be alone for 5 minutes. The mate bond had conveyed her distress, pulling him away from tactical meeting to address crisis that threatened to break Luna, who'd survived everything else. I can't do this. Sarah's voice was small and defeated, all confidence stripped away by weeks of relentless pressure. Everyone wants something from me, and I don't have enough to give. I'm not Elena Moonfire reborn. I'm just Medic, who got lucky and survived when she shouldn't have. Jack knelt beside her, taking her hands with gentle care that contrasted his usual alpha authority. You're right. You can't do everything everyone wants. Nobody can. That's why I'm going to start saying no on your behalf. I can't refuse people who need healing. Sarah's protest was automatic medic training that prioritized others' needs over her own well-being. You can and you will. Jack's voice was firm alpha command mixed with mate's protective concern. Starting today, you see maximum of 5 visitors per day scheduled through Marcus with priority given to life-threatening cases. Everything else gets delegated or deferred. You're no good to anyone if you burn yourself out trying to help everyone at once. But people are depending on me. Sarah voiced fear that had been driving her self-destructive pattern. People were depending on you during Volkov's assault, and you delivered. Jack reminded her of victories she tended to minimize when focusing on casualties she hadn't prevented. But that was crisis situation with clear tactical objectives. What you're facing now is ongoing demand that will never end if you don't establish boundaries. Let me handle logistics of managing expectations. You focus on healing yourself before trying to heal everyone else. The permission to prioritize her own needs felt revolutionary after 3 years of captivity where others' desires had determined every aspect of her existence. Sarah leaned into Jack's embrace, feeling mate bond convey acceptance that didn't depend on her being perfectly selfless or infinitely capable. Recovery took months' careful balance between meeting obligations and maintaining boundaries that protected Sarah's well-being. She developed systems for triaging requests, identifying cases where her unique abilities were truly necessary versus situations where conventional medical treatment would suffice. Marcus became invaluable in this process, serving as buffer between Sarah and constant demands while coordinating Blackridge's expanding role in supernatural communities' reconstruction. He had talent for diplomatic deflection, politely refusing requests that would overwhelm Luna, while maintaining relationships that Blackridge needed for long-term stability. Williams established a transportation network that brought critical cases to Blackridge, rather than requiring Sarah to travel constantly, recognizing that defensive compound provided security she needed to function effectively. Chen coordinated with other PAC's security teams, ensuring that visitors underwent screening that prevented potential threats from accessing Luna, who'd made powerful enemies through her role in Council's collapse. And Wright monitored Sarah's health, obsessively enforcing rest periods and limiting healing sessions when her Moonfire abilities showed signs of strain. He'd survived too many deployments watching young soldiers burn themselves out trying to prove their worth. He wouldn't allow Luna to destroy herself through similar pattern. 6 months after Volkov's death, Sarah finally felt like she was finding balance, contributing to supernatural communities' reconstruction without sacrificing her own well-being, meeting obligations without allowing them to define her entire existence. The guilt over 3 PAC members she hadn't saved still haunted her, but she'd learned to channel that grief into determination that their sacrifice wouldn't be meaningless. Jack proposed formally at winter solstice, traditional time for werewolf matings, when PAC bonds were strongest. The ceremony was simple by Luna standards, no elaborate ritual or political spectacle, just quiet acknowledgement before Blackridge, the pact of commitment they'd already made for survival and shared trials. Sarah accepted with joy that felt almost foreign after years of trauma and months of overwhelming responsibility. The mate bond that had formed during crisis was deepening into partnership built on mutual respect and hard-won trust. Jack had proven himself worthy of authority. He wielded not through dominance, but through consistent demonstration that he valued her autonomy and capabilities. The mating ceremony happened under full moon with Blackridge PAC as witnesses traditional vows exchanged, while wolves howled acceptance. Sarah wore simple dress rather than elaborate Luna regalia, refusing to perform for audience beyond her immediate PAC. This was personal moment, sacred commitment between mates, not political theater for supernatural communities' consumption. Wright officiated, speaking words that had been used for werewolf matings since before written records existed. The ceremony was brief but profound recognition that two wolves had chosen to face future together, regardless of what challenges that future held. And when it was over, when vows had been exchanged and Pack had howled their approval, Sarah felt something shift within her consciousness. The mate bond, which had been growing stronger since auction house, suddenly crystallized into a permanent connection that transcended normal Pack relationships. She could feel Jack's emotions as clearly as her own sense his location without conscious effort communicate through impressions that required no words. The connection was intimate in ways that had nothing to do with physical attraction, merger of consciousness, that made them stronger together than either could be alone. This is what Elena Moonfire must have felt with her mate. Sarah's voice was wonder-filled, experiencing depth of connection that historical accounts had failed to adequately describe. Not just emotional support or tactical partnership, but actual fusion of consciousness that created something larger than sum of individual parts. Jack pulled her close mate bond, conveying love that words would diminish through inadequate expression. We're in this together. Whatever comes next, we face it as partners. The epilogue arrived 3 months later in form that neither of them anticipated. Sarah had been feeling unusually tired, attributing exhaustion to sustained use of Moonfire abilities during healing sessions. But when nausea persisted beyond what simple fatigue explained, Wright insisted on comprehensive medical examination. The pregnancy test was positive, confirming what Wright had suspected based on hormone levels and subtle changes in Sarah's energy signature. She was approximately 6 weeks along conception, having occurred during or shortly after mate bond completion. Jack's reaction was pure joy, unmarred by complications that would inevitably follow. A pup. Our pup. His hand rested on Sarah's still flat abdomen with reverent care. Continuation of bloodlines that everyone thought were finished. Sarah's emotions were more complicated, happiness mixed with fear about bringing child into world that remained dangerous despite recent victories. The council's collapse had created temporary peace, but old patterns reasserted themselves quickly. Territorial disputes were escalating. Criminal organizations were expanding into power vacuum, and not everyone approved of role that Blackridge had assumed in supernatural communities' reconstruction. What if something happens? Sarah voiced fear that pregnancy made suddenly visceral. What if someone targets the baby because of my bloodline or your authority? Then we protect them. Jack's response was alpha certainty backed by tactical confidence that had kept Blackridge safe from multiple existential threats. The same way we protect each other and our pack. We build defenses, establish allies, and make it clear that threatening our family means accepting total war in return. The pregnancy progressed normally despite Sarah's concerns. Moonfire abilities apparently protecting developing pup from complications that might affect normal werewolf reproduction. Wright monitored her health obsessively, fascinated by physiological changes that combined alpha and Luna genetics in unprecedented ways. The pup's power signature was detectable by 4 months' energy that resonated with both Jack's alpha dominance and Sarah's Moonfire heritage. Wright predicted that child would be extraordinarily powerful once their abilities manifested, potentially exceeding even Sarah's considerable capabilities. The birth happened during spring, thunderstorm nature itself seeming to acknowledge significance of new Moonfire Luna entering the world. Sarah's labor was complicated by energy surges that crackled through medical facility, Moonfire abilities responding to pain and stress by flooding environment with healing magic. But 12 hours after contractions began, their daughter arrived screaming with healthy fury that suggested strong lungs and strong will. Sarah held her newborn while exhaustion overwhelmed everything else, feeling love so profound it made 3 years of suffering worthwhile if it had been necessary price for reaching this moment. What should we name her? Jack's voice was soft, studying, tiny face that somehow combined features from both parents into something entirely new. Sarah had been thinking about this question throughout pregnancy, considering various options before settling on answer that felt appropriate. Elena, after my grandmother. So the Moonfire line's legacy continues with name that honors where we came from. Jack nodded slowly, seeing rightness in choice that connected their daughter to history while acknowledging debt they owed to ancestors who'd fought for their survival. Elena Maddox, future of bloodline, everyone tried to destroy. The baby yawned, tiny hand closing around Sarah's finger with grip that suggested strength exceeding normal newborn capacity. Her eyes opened briefly, gold and green swirled together, inheritance from both parents creating color that shouldn't exist in nature. She's perfect. Sarah's voice was thick with emotion that years of trauma hadn't managed to destroy. Everything we survived, everything we fought for, it was worth it to get here. Jack kissed her forehead, made bonds and vague agreement that transcended need for verbal confirmation. 3 years ago, you were a prisoner thinking you'd never be free. Now you're Luna, holding our daughter while Pax celebrates outside. Life has a strange way of delivering happy endings to people who refuse to quit. Through the window, Sarah could hear Blackridge Pack howling welcome for new pack member voices joining in song that had celebrated werewolf births since species emerged from prehistoric darkness. The sound was beautiful and primal acknowledgement that despite everything they'd survived, life continued its inexorable forward momentum. Marcus appeared in doorway with expression mixing joy and tactical concern. Congratulations, Luna. She's beautiful. But you should know we're getting messages from PACs across North America requesting permission to send representatives to meet her. Apparently, everyone wants to acknowledge Elena Moonfire's heir having daughter who carries the bloodline forward. Tell them no. Sarah's response was immediate and non-negotiable. She's 3 hours old. Political obligations can wait until after I've slept, and she's old enough to not be terrified by strangers. Marcus grinned, recognizing Luna, who learned to prioritize her own needs over others' expectations. I'll handle the diplomatic deflection. You focus on being mother instead of symbol for once. The years following Elena's birth brought gradual stabilization as supernatural community adapted to new governance structures. Regional councils formed built on principles of transparency and accountability that Sarah had articulated at Continental Assembly. Territorial disputes were mediated through negotiation rather than violence. Criminal enterprises faced coordinated opposition from alliances that had replaced council's corrupt hierarchy. Blackridge remained influential, but avoided concentrating power in ways that might recreate problems they'd fought to eliminate. Jack and Sarah served as advisors rather than rulers, offering guidance while respecting other packs' autonomy to make their own decisions. Elena grew quickly, displaying precocious intelligence and power signature that exceeded even optimistic predictions. By age 2, she could shift between human and wolf forms with ease that took most werewolves years to develop. By 3, she was demonstrating early Moonfire abilities, healing small injuries through touch that glowed with silver light. Sarah watched her daughter grow with a mixture of pride and apprehension, seeing potential for greatness, balanced against dangers that extraordinary power invariably attracted. But she was determined that Elena would have childhood she'd been denied freedom to develop naturally support, to explore capabilities without pressure to perform protection from those who might seek to exploit or eliminate her. The Moonfire bloodline had survived attempts at extinction, thriving, despite systematic efforts to erase it from existence. Sarah had transformed from prisoner to warrior to Luna, claiming authority through trial rather than inheritance. And now she was raising daughter who represented hope that supernatural community could evolve beyond patterns that had caused so much suffering. The journey from auction platform to Alpha's Maid had been brutal, testing Sarah in ways that should have destroyed her. But she'd endured through combination of strength, stubbornness, and support from Maid, who'd spent 15 years keeping promise to Dead Man. Standing in Blackridge compound, watching Elena play with other pack children, Sarah finally understood what right had meant about survival, requiring purpose beyond personal grief. She'd survive so she could expose council corruption, defeat Volkov's trafficking network, and create a world where daughter wouldn't have to experience trauma that had defined Sarah's life. The scars remained physical evidence of 3 years captivity, marked her skin's psychological wounds that required ongoing attention. But they no longer defined her. She was Luna in her own right, mother raising powerful daughter partner to Alpha, who'd proven himself worthy of trust she'd thought impossible to give. Jack joined her on an observation deck, sliding arm around her waist, while they watched Elena demonstrate healing abilities to impressed pack members. Our daughter just restored withered flower to full bloom. I think we might have underestimated how powerful she'll become. Good. Sarah's voice carried satisfaction that surprised her. Means she'll be strong enough to protect herself when threats inevitably emerge. We won't be able to shield her forever. No, but we can teach her to be warrior who happens to heal rather than healer who needs protecting. Jack understood better than most that power without competence was liability rather than asset. Between your combat experience and my tactical training, she'll be most dangerous 3-year-old in North America. Sarah laughed, feeling joy that would have seemed impossible during darkest moments of captivity. We've come a long way from auction house, where you bought my freedom. I didn't buy your freedom, Jack corrected gently. I bought opportunity for you to reclaim it yourself. Everything after that exposing council, defeating Volkov, becoming Luna, that was you choosing to fight rather than accept defeat. The mate bond conveyed truth behind his words, recognition that Sarah's strength had been an essential component of every victory they'd achieved. She'd survived because she'd refused to be broken, thrived because she'd channeled trauma into determination. That system, which had victimized her, would be dismantled and rebuilt better. So what happens now? Sarah voiced question that had been recurring throughout their daughter's early childhood. We've defeated immediate threats, established new governance structures, started raising Elena. What comes next? Jack pulled her closer. Mate bond conveying contentment that came from finally achieving peace worth fighting for. Now we live. Build something that lasts beyond the violence that created it. Teach Elena to be better than we were. Maybe find time to enjoy the fact that we're not constantly fighting for survival. The simplicity of that vision life, defined by growth rather than crisis, future built through accumulated small victories rather than desperate last stands, felt revolutionary. After years of trauma and conflict, Sarah leaned into her mate's embrace, watching daughter, who represented hope that Moonfire bloodline would thrive rather than merely survive. The journey from chains to crown had tested her beyond anything she'd thought possible to endure. But she'd survived, thrived, transformed from victim into force that had reshaped North American supernatural politics. And now she was building legacy that would outlast the suffering that had forged her. That was victory enough.